no man's land. Yeah. And when you ride the train,
really sad news is,
if you take a train from Ukraine through Transnistria into Moldova, they actually stop the train in Transnistria and guards come on board and look at your passport and everything else. But it's not like a recognized country. It's really weird.
well, the really sad news is in Moldova they've appointed an anti-corruption bureau now.
Oh, yeah, they have to, because their prime minister stole $1 billion, which is 1/10 of the entire value of the country.
I heard the police force there is corrupted too, so you need citizen app there.
So I was there when I arrived in Chisinau, which is the capital of Moldova. I go into the center of the city. My hotel's right near where the parliament building is and the capital. And there was a whole bunch of people camped in front of the Capitol. And so I was like, I'm asking the taxi driver, what's this about? And he was trying to explain, but his English wasn't that great. So I, check into the hotel. I go back to where all the people are. And it's a whole bunch of students all camped in front of the Capitol. And I was like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, we're going to have a big protest tomorrow. It's Saturday. And the country wants a new election because our prime minister just stole $1 billion, which is 1/10 of our total national, value. And I was like, holy cow. So then just down the one block away from them is a separate massive government building and a whole separate encampment of different people, all with brand new tents with kitchens and bathrooms outside in the park, and interesting kind of undercover security guards walking around with, earpieces and microphones. And those were the Russian-sponsored protesters who also wanted a new election because they want to, the current prime minister at that time, this is about 6 years ago, the guy who stole $1 billion, he was democratically elected. And he was not communist, but he stole $1 billion. And now the Communist Party and Putin were economically supporting the communists who wanted to have an emergency election. The students who are more kind of non-communist also wanted an emergency election to elect a new person democratically. And so the communists were being incredibly well funded, and they had all their tents were paid for, all their food was paid for, there were toilets brought in. The students had nothing, just whatever tents they brought. And sure enough, the next day there was a massive protest, which was a combination of students and Kremlin-funded communists who were shouting, we want a new election, kick out this kind of corrupt prime minister that we have. And it was really interesting because
Sorry, Tyler, 2 minutes past the hour.
Yes, thank you. So just to finish the story, there were so many protesters that the police locked arms shoulder to shoulder and surrounded the parliament to prevent the people from storming the parliament. And then they were right up against the building, like say 1 meter away from their back to the building. And then 3 meters in front of them was another circle of police figures, but who were very much less intimidating, much more casual demeanor, much more casual dress. They were not really heavily militarized. They looked like friendly police officers. And it was the military who was with automatic rifles with back-to-back around the government building. And it was clear, like, wow, there could be a coup, like, right now. Like, I had never seen, been up front in person to a potential coup. But, that was a wild moment. So am I imagining things, or is there somebody named Avesta Rasuli in the audience here? Am I tripping out? Avesta, are you in the audience? If you are, raise your hand.
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand, Avesta.
Hands up in the air.
There he is. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we have a true treat today as we just opened the room. And one of my very dearest friends, Avesta Rasuli, is in the audience. And he's like a brother to me. I miss you. Buddy, how are you?
Hey, buddy, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
How is everyone? I'm doing great.
We're doing great. Hey, Pumpkin. Yeah, you just wanted to hear my sexy voice. I know how it
I
is.
just that's the only way I get to hear your sexy voice if I join
Ah,
Clubhouse and start listening to you.
yeah. So for those who don't know, Avesta and I are obviously very best buddies. I would, you know what's funny, Avesta?
Hmm.
Watch this. Watch this. Cheryl, everyone on stage joins us every day. Avesta, you're the only odd newbie on stage. Everyone else on stage, we do this twice a day, every day. So, did I or did I not say the best night of my life was what? What I said like 2 days ago. The best,
Ooh,
the best night of my
Persian
life,
wedding.
I
a Persian
I don't
wedding.
want.
Did I not say that,
Yeah, I
Cam?
was gonna say my.
Yes,
Yeah,
you
I was gonna
said.
say my
Yes,
You
you
know
did.
who?
my now
Yes, you
ex
said that.
wedding.
Yes, you did.
Yeah,
Yes, you
Do
did.
yeah,
you?
yeah.
It was actually Avesta's wedding that I was referring to.
Whoa.
Oh wow, that was
There you
6
go.
hours ago that you said that.
Woo.
Yes.
You
It
set
did.
the bar too high, Vesta.
No, well, I know. I should also say that it did not end very happily, but he
Why is
did
that?
it counted as his best night, so that paid off within itself as long as Tyler had fun.
It was only a few $1,000,000 for that wedding. It was
That's it.
unbelievable.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
and
Anyways,
yeah,
that
I'm
was
not doing that
fantastic.
again.
I was telling
Yeah.
everybody if they ever have the chance, they have to go to a Persian wedding. Not that it'll be like yours, but
Yes, try it out. It's
yeah.
definitely worth it as long as someone
Try
else
it
is
out.
paying the bill.
Right. As
The
long
Persian
as,
loves to party.
yeah, it was
And
amazing. It
their
went
food
all
is
night.
great.
Yep.
They have great
So
food.
anyway, Avesta is one of my very dearest friends and played a super significant role in the development of the Los Angeles tech ecosystem. And is he's Persian by from his parents, but actually grew up in Sweden and then moved to LA to do tech.
That's right.
Yeah, which I just talked about that as well. I was saying how Sweden is kind of taking. I said yes 24 hours ago. That's no. In the last meeting we did
That was
about
6 hours ago, yeah.
yeah about 6 hours ago, I was like, you know what? Like Sweden's taking in a lot of the Persians from the Iranian Revolution and back in the 80s. Anyway, we're going to do the news. Avesta, what to you is the most interesting thing in tech news at this moment? We're going to go through all the top tech. We're going to be here for the next 3 hours covering all the top headlines. What to you is exciting in tech at the moment?
I mean, just in the past week, I've been watching the cryptos and
Yeah.
how they're moving.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's been the point of excitement,
Yep.
being into it, not too heavily, but a little bit.
Yep.
That's what I'm following closely.
Well, we're going to get into that. So that's probably like the second big headline coming up, and then you want to toot your horn about Honk?
No, it's all good. I just wanted to hear you. So,
Okay.
Honk's doing well, thankfully. Yes.
Okay.
But thanks for
Yep.
asking.
I wanted to give you the floor. So here we go. The top biggest headline in the news at this very moment happens to be Apple plans a modest iPhone update, as I predicted when we were in this room 6 hours ago. That the experts are saying that the iPhone 13 or the iPhone 12s or whatever they end up calling it is actually going to be kind of the smallest update they've ever done. That's the rumors. And now Bloomberg is saying that as well. Mark Gurman from Bloomberg, who kind of makes a living out of tracking these things, the headline says, Apple, he has sources. Apple plans a modest iPhone update with a smaller notch at the top of the screen, a faster refresh rate, about goddamn time. They got to do 120 hertz refresh rate because even phones half the price of the iPhone have 120 megahertz refresh rate now. And camera upgrades, although relatively minor, including what they call ProRes recording and video portrait mode. And do you know why they're doing ProRes portrait mode? I think you do. If you follow us every day here, you know goddamn well why they're updating the selfie camera. And you're probably thinking, oh, because selfies are popular and everyone wants to do selfies. And indeed, yes, that's one reason, but that's not the only reason. Oh no, there's much more important reasons than that. But I have my notepad just did a big crash, so I gotta. Where is my? How do I get to my notes? Where's my notes? I need my notes.
Look.
Hold on one second. I need to. What's going on here? View Folders. Show folders.
I can
Here we go.
connect you to a
I got it.
senior
Okay.
technician that can
That's
help
right.
you if you
We're
need.
done. Here it is. So with this new ProRes camera on the new iPhone that's coming out, they're going to announce it almost exactly a month from now. It's usually around September 8th, 9th, or 10th when Apple does its annual event where they reveal the next iPhone for that year. And it'll probably be virtual this year, again, due to COVID. And we will live stream it here because it'll usually be 10 a.m. Pacific, which is usually right at the end of Tech News. And we'll live stream it as we always do. We have a lot of fun. And the point, though, is that without a doubt, the most noticeable change to this new iPhone will be the selfie camera, but not for the reason you might think. And we know this because the selfie camera on the iPad Pro also has this lens, and it's remarkable. And everyone who has reviewed the iPad Pro, of course, it was about the M1 chip, right? Everyone's freaking out about, an iPad with an M1 chip. But as impressive as that M1 chip in an iPad Pro might be, what really got all the reviewers' attention was, holy shit, is this selfie cam amazing? And especially if you zoom in on your face. And here's why that's so amazing, and here's why it's coming into your iPhone. Because with this new super high, what they call ProRes selfie cam on your new phone, and by the way, it will also come in the new laptops, guaranteed. And here's why I know that. Because when they put in that camera in your new device, they can get all kinds of new juicy, sweet, juicy data from your fucking face. What am I referring to? Here's what I'm referring to. With this new updated ProRes camera on the selfie side of the phone and your laptop and your iPad, here's just a couple of little things they can get out of that sweet, juicy data. They can get your gender from your iris, from looking at your iris, inside of your eyeball, that beautiful colored ring around your pupil, that's your iris. And here's what they can tell from your iris. They can tell your gender from your iris, and they can tell your age from your iris. And there's more. They can tell what they call your biometric identity, meaning they can identify you like your fingerprint. They can identify you from your iris. It's far more accurate than even doing a face ID, is your iris ID. And then they can tell physical health characteristics, like if you've ever had a concussion or chronic pain or vision disorders or obesity, Parkinson's disease, your mental health, of depression, PTSD, autism, eating disorders, personality traits of extroversion, neuroticism, curiosity, drug consumption of alcohol, tobacco, cocaine, MDMA, cannabis, cognitive processes, mental workloads, level of sleepiness. And we also read a headline about a month ago that they can even detect early stages of heart disease from your iris. And they're just getting started. So now when they announce that new ProRes selfie camera, and oh boy, are all of the Instagram influencers going to be oh so excited, and little do they know that it's all about their sweet, juicy data from your eyeball that they want to get. Of course, you can take better selfies. Yeah, granted, kudos. And that's what they're going to tell you. You think they're going to tell you they're getting all that data from your eyeball? No. Why would they? But they are going to tell you that you can take really amazing selfies, and you're going to be super, super impressed. And my God, doesn't my selfie look great? I can't wait to get that phone and give all of my sweet, juicy data over to Apple to improve their ad network. Chris?
And don't forget about the social commerce, because I think most of that would be selfie cam driven as well, Tyler, right? Because you want to be able to see the comments and stuff as you're live streaming, so you wouldn't use the well, not
right.
Not that it's impossible,
no,
but you'd likely use the
let me explain what you're hinting at here, which is, as everyone's starting to realize, as we've been ranting every day for 5 months now, that social commerce is now on our doorstep. And that means when you're doing social commerce, which as Lakeisha has confirmed politely for at least 100 times now, here in Asia, everybody and their brother is selling stuff on all of these social media websites, including Facebook. So Facebook is being used fundamentally in a very different way here in Thailand at the moment and throughout Asia, because what you can do is there's a buy button to sell stuff in real time while you're live streaming. And that's why Instagram is now switching over to video. And that's why you saw the headlines yesterday and the day before that all the Instagram influencers are all in a tizzy, because they're all of that duck lip surgery that they did ain't going to help them, be the hot celebrity on Instagram no more, because they're changing over to video. And more so, they're going to switch over to live streaming. And they already have live streaming. They're going to start focusing on live streaming because starting now, and it's already happening in the East here, in Southeast Asia, around China, that you can sell products through Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and WhatsApp and Snapchat. There's a little buy button. And when you see that little buy button, of course you can take a photo and you can sell whatever's in the photo, and then you'll realize, wait, what if I made a video? And then you make a video and you realize you sell more from a video than a photo, and then you think, because you're a clever little cookie, aren't you? You got straight A's. You were in the advanced class, right? So you're thinking, you know what? What if I made a live stream? Being the smart little cookie you are, and you do the live stream, and sure enough, you realize, holy shit, I just made 10 times more money by doing a live stream than a video, which made 10 times more than doing a photo. I'm making 100 times more when I do a live stream than a photo, selling all kinds of crazy shit like makeup and lipsticks and body creams and shampoos and shoes and shirts and socks and underwear and everything, basketballs, you name it. They're selling it around the clock, hopped up on a mountain of meth like Robin Williams, 1980, like Jim Carrey, peak Jim Carrey manic craziness, selling everything you can imagine in real time. And the point is, they're using the selfie camera, to Chris's point. And this new camera, you're going to want a really good selfie camera on the inside of your phone so that you can see the screen, because the people watching your live stream are going to be sending you comments and questions in real time. How do I know this? Because Lakeisha and I are doing this all the time here in Thailand. We're watching these live streams and we are asking these crazy people questions in real time about, can you please smell the shoe and tell me what it smells like? And they smell the shoe and they tell you what it smells like. And so that's the future of shopping. And why it's the future of shopping is because it's so goddamn entertaining. You're going to find out that there are these new types of social commerce celebrities that aren't popular today, but will become billionaires tomorrow, as is already happening in Asia. You have the lipstick king, as he's known in China, is worth $1 billion because he's selling $1 billion worth of makeup products through social live stream e-commerce. And that's why Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, all of them are switching over to live streaming, because that's where the money is. And they're greedy bastards, all of these people, at the end of the day. They didn't make these platforms so that you can, show off your, puffed up lip surgery. They made these platforms because they're greedy bastards. And so that's why it's inevitable that it's going to go this way, as it already is done in Asia, and they already know it. And we're starting to see it in the West, and there you go. So that's why the selfie camera, you're right, Chris, it's partly due to the selfie, social commerce. So
great.
next,
Hello. Before we move on,
Yeah.
there are many regulars in the room now. You want to
sorry.
take some time to pick
Yeah,
them
yeah.
up,
Sorry,
please?
Dr. Francine
Dr.
and
Francine,
Nessie
Charles,
and
is there,
Charles,
Kiran is there.
and yeah. So anyone else, feel free.
Yeah, please raise your hand now.
I have an update regarding a question we brought up yesterday,
Go ahead,
news rather. The Cementa crisis with the concrete in Sweden has been not resolved, but they have given them an 8 months more to actually deliver the they want to have completering, what's the word for it? They want to have more documents from Heidelberg to the government to be able to give the permission. So this was the one that Blink lost, and in this case it was the government that lost again. So now they've given 8 more months to see if they can give them the documents they need. But the emergency crisis for the total stop of construction, mining, etc. in Sweden is for now over. It will return next summer. Keep yourself updated. Johan done.
Thank you, Johan.
Dr. Francine, do you have a hot mic?
That's okay. I got it.
I do.
Yes.
I want to say something.
Go ahead, Francine.
What are you doing?
Love Dr. Francine. Clear. Well, I don't unmute, unless I have something to say.
Yeah.
Clear.
Yes.
Iris identification for years. And the reason that I know it is because I don't have any fingerprints left. And it's the only way that they can identify me.
Oh.
And it's part of the protocol that you go through to get a clear license or clear at whatever it is to go through airports.
Yes.
And they are trying to expand their business to include vaccinated travelers.
Oh.
So this selfie camera might be one use, but iris identification is going to be a biggie.
Charles, we happen to have the benefit of Mr. Charles Johnson on stage, one of the co-founders of Clearview AI, which is the largest facial recognition system in the US, perhaps in the world. And Charles, what's your thought on iris identification versus facial identification?
I mean, it works, but not. I mean, my view is that facial recognition is going to be a larger deal because you can identify people at distance. You were kind of required to be right up against them if you're doing the iris identification. But in theory, any extremities, fingerprints, ears, any of that kind of thing would work for purposes of identification.
But I'm wondering, perhaps people would feel less, what's the word I'm looking for? Vulnerable or exposed or whatever, if we were using an iris-based ID system or even a thumbprint based rather than a face based, because they're worried that their face will be seen in places they don't want to be seen, but your iris or your thumb is less revealing in some kind of way.
And I also wonder about the accuracy between the facial versus the iris or the thumbprint.
Well, Tyler, the interesting thing about the facial identification is, like, in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been tremendous advances in the three-dimensional, spatial imaging. So, like in your iPhone, if you have Face ID, there's what are called VXLs. They're tiny lasers that basically display like 10,000 infrared dots at your face. And based on the way the dots look to the camera, they can, make it a 3D image. And so, like, that's really the powerful, ad. And those chips are now down to several dollars each. You can go buy a facial ID chip. And I believe the iris recognition has probably hit that level too, where there's probably chips that just quickly identify your eyes. Like, what really drove Face ID is, I don't know if you're aware, but they can tell if your eyes are looking at it. And that's the real cue. And that's all chip driven. It's not really software per se driven. It's at the chip level. So they know how to detect eyes very easily now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I think the ultimate ID form is going to be DNA, just because that's literally the most information you could possibly have on somebody is their DNA. So I think that's where it ultimately ends up. But I would say in general, facial recognition for at distance is kind of what the largest use case is. I don't support, like, I've been asked to invest in vaccine passport companies, and I don't support that, as a policy. So for ethical reasons, I've avoided those companies. But man, are they flying around everywhere now? Like, everybody has a vaccine passport business that they want to pitch me or talk about, and it's very frustrating, to put it mildly, because I don't think that that's the right approach to the COVID problem. I obviously favor much more genetic sequencing than that kind of thing. So, but it is very interesting to see all these new applications of the technology, and I suspect that we'll see. I think Clearview will obviously win its court battles, and I suspect we're going to see a lot more push from the national security infrastructure to be much more pro facial recognition as time goes on. The Clear people have had a lot of accuracy issues in the past, but my understanding is that they're in a much better position now than they were, say, like 2 years ago, and that kind of gives a sense of like how the technology is evolving.
Okay, so let's get into. We only covered the top big headline of the day, which is the new iPhone's going to have a real modest update, as I've been saying, telling everybody for the past few days. And then the second biggest story at this very moment is Apple's planned to find the child abuse imagery should have centered around scanning images on iCloud servers, not users' devices, where there is a greater expectation of privacy. And that's Ben Thompson from Stratechery's blog post, which has got quite viral today. And yeah, I think he has a point there, where I think it's really on the scanning on people's devices that they feel violated. more so than if Apple said, we're going to scan the iCloud, when in reality, they're kind of similar, but not exactly the same. And he might have a good point there. Why do they feel the need to actually get into your photo roll in your device? We will see. As it seems like they're taking a really strong stance on this internally. They built an FAQ page to help address misconceptions and concerns about the photo scanning. Nonetheless, the EFF, Snowden, and 5,500 security experts around the world are now pleading with Apple to reconsider, because of the slippery slope syndrome, that if you give a government an inch, they'll take a mile, as we've seen in India with Twitter, for example, and all the social media platforms in India. Just for an example, if you a large government knows, and it's been amazing to watch, where it started with WeChat, where WeChat said they're going to update their privacy policy in a way that India didn't like, and India said, no, you can't do that. And WhatsApp.
Sorry, you mean WhatsApp?
I'm sorry. I always confuse WhatsApp and WeChat because their logos and the names are too similar. Yes, I do mean WhatsApp. So WhatsApp said they're going to change their privacy policy, and India said, no, you can't do that. They said, yeah, well, watch us. And they said, yeah, well, you can change your policy, but then we can kick you out of India. And you can have fun changing your policy and not being involved in India. That would be great for us too. We would prefer that you leave India. So please do change your privacy policy, and please do leave India. It's been fun. We can replace you, just like we replaced the 200 plus Chinese apps like TikTok. And we're super, super fucking happy we did that, by the way, because now we've got dozens. We're up to 21 unicorns in the first half of 2021 in India alone. And they're popping off a new unicorn lately at about one every 3 fucking days. So please believe me when I say get the fuck out of our country so we can replace you with a domestic new unicorn that'll pop off. It only takes about 6 months from 0 to unicorn when we replace your dumbass. So please change your privacy policy, and please get the fuck out of our country, because we would love to have a domestic unicorn. In fact, we already have 20 of them in the first 6 months after we told the Chinese app to get the fuck out. So Facebook, please listen very closely. Please go ahead and threaten to change your privacy policy, and please do show yourself the fucking door, you dumbass, because we would love you to do that if you think we're bluffing. And then what does WhatsApp say? Oh, sorry, boss, you got it. Whatever you want, boss. Sorry, boss, we didn't mean to upset you, boss. Of course we're going to stay. Whatever you say, boss. What do you want to do, boss? You the boss. You want us to do what? But you want to have to jump on our heads every time we go into the building now? You got it, boss. We got to jump up and down and eat a turkey sandwich, and rub our belly twice, and whatever you say, boss, we're willing to do it, because this is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity to be here in India. So we're going to do whatever you say, boss. Now, they're doing the same to Twitter. They told Twitter, take down anything with the hashtag resign Modi. Well, we have free speech in India, and Twitter was quick to remind India, well, this is free speech. And India said, take it down or leave the country. And Twitter said, are you bluffing? We're not sure if you're bluffing. Let's see if you're bluffing. And they played around for several weeks, back and forth. And then Twitter learned they're not bluffing. We're going to have to do whatever India says, or we have to get out. And they want us out. But Twitter now knows India would love to kick Twitter out of India. Please, sweet baby Jesus, please get the fuck out of our country. We already have your replacement waiting. It's called KOO. It already has investment from Chamath Palihapitiya and Balaji. They've already invested in it. We can't wait to turn it into the next unicorn. Please, Jack, please get the fuck out of our country. Sweet baby Jesus, please. Please cause us one more ounce of headache. We would love for you to stop doing business here. And Twitter,
people just, yeah.
Twitter realizes they're not fucking around. But here's the bigger point: is because India has shown that when you've got a big, juicy, sweet market, these tech companies will do any goddamn thing that these regimes ask them to do, because at the end of the day, they're greedy ass bastards. And so they're going to do whatever Big Papa Modi tells them to do. Anything. And by the way, we already knew this, because they were willing to do anything in China. Zuckerberg was speaking full-on Mandarin in China to a huge audience of Mandarin speakers in Chinese. They were all excited that Mark is speaking Mandarin. Big whoop-de-doo. And Mark knows he would have to do anything Uncle Xi told him to do business in China. And he was willing to do absolutely anything Uncle Xi wanted him to do at any time. So the point is, now when Apple is opening a little back door for scanning of photos and microphone and messages, it's 3 different things going on here. It's not just the photos. When the government realizes that this is now technically possible, you've cracked open Pandora's box just a touch. And there's Apple swearing up and down, we're not going to scan for anything else. No. We're only going to do this one use case. And every security expert on the planet and anyone who sees the nature of tech versus governments, once governments realize they can do something, they're just going to ram it down your throat. You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice as a tech company. The governments have you by the you know what. And they're more than happy to do whatever they can do once they know it's possible to do it. You were saying, Charles?
Oh, Monica is back.
Oh, Monica's back. Where's Monica?
I was saying, I think people really don't understand the degree to which a lot of these privacy complaints are actually cynical attempts by rival companies or by rival governments to kick people out, or to basically harm business models. In this particular case, Facebook is like very much hated by our IC because they essentially don't play ball with the intelligence community. Twitter often does play ball with the U.S. government, and so that's partly why they're not as hated as Facebook is. And when you look at Apple, Tim Cook, an Auburn graduate, I mean, he's very much trying to change the relationship that Apple has had historically with the U.S. government. And I think that's why you see them moving so hard on the CSAM issue. I should note EFF is making this argument, that the privacy issues are really, really bad. I mean, EFF gets funding from Google. Like, we should just be honest about that. And EFF has historically defended the right of Backpage to traffic in children, which is just disgusting, but that's what they've done. So I think this idea of making the internet safe for children, for women, for the least of these, I think this is something that a lot of people, could grow to support. Now, of course, they say this is a slippery slope, but a slippery slope is an observation, not an argument. I mean, it doesn't logically follow that they're going to start censoring people's phones for things beyond child abuse imagery. And let's just kind of keep in mind, like, polling is something on the order of like 80 to 90% in favor of this sort of thing. By just like normal people, not sort of people who are like obsessively on.
Okay,
Has the slippery slope argument ever not?
I have to respond to that.
Go ahead, Francine.
A very good friend of mine who is a pioneering investigative reporter owned Backpage and has been landed on by the federal government for supposedly trafficking children. And that was always bullshit, because what he did was report to the federal government whenever he saw a child trafficking issue in an ad on his site. And the entire case against him is political, and you'll see when the trial comes up. And that's why EFF is actually defending him. So I really hate it when people talk about things they only have half the information about.
No, I followed the case quite closely and helped law enforcement actually make the arrest. He was warned repeatedly, and that this will also come out in the trial
Charles,
as well.
Go look at Front Page Confidential.
Okay,
I've seen. Look, to be candid, I think the FBI made a pig's breakfast of actually like arresting him and dealing with him, but he was repeatedly warned by the FBI.
Yeah, and you got EFF backing with things. Yeah, how did EFF tie in with this stuff when you had some of your employees essentially having some of those issues?
I didn't catch what you just said.
We've Ann Hauser, what things, very controversial hacker fellow things, is associated with your company with things at Clearview with.
Oh, in the case,
essentially when
in the case of EFF, I mean, so just to be very clear on my sort of dislike of EFF, it goes back a number of years. But basically, what happens with EFF is, in our case, they've come very hard against Clearview. And what they're particularly pissed off in is that we actually used a precedent that they argued in the past in a case of HiQ v. LinkedIn, when again, they were funded by Google to basically put the hurt on LinkedIn. And that case is kind of interesting because they argued in that case that there's a public right to scrape publicly available information in the HiQ v. LinkedIn case. So, of course, Clearview used that precedent to scrape Google and to scrape Facebook and sort of other EFF donors, and now they're against the right to scrape publicly available data. They're saying that there's a difference between scraping publicly available data and so-called face prints. And this is, of course, because Facebook and Google are very worried about the effect of scraping them and how it breaks down their network effects. So EFF, in my view, and in the view of a lot of people, masquerades as one of these civil rights organizations, but essentially does what's at the behest of their donors. And in the case of the Backpage advocacy it was doing, and let's just be clear about Backpage. I mean, it was a website in which people bought and paid for for sex, sometimes with children, but not exclusively, and sometimes between consenting adults. But what started to happen is, in this particular case of Backpage and EFF sort of support for them, the basic issue was over CDA 230. And the law enforcement's view is that you should not be hosting anything that's illegal. And that if you do that, you're subject to liability. Now, CDA 230 is what a lot of sort of more progressive people claim basically is a shield on the internet. It's a part of the Communication and Decency Act 1996. And essentially what it claims is that there's no liability for the company for hosting, bad images of children, of that sort of thing. And people have taken a very extremist interpretation of CDA 230, and there've been, lawsuits, and there's been legislation passed that's amended CDA 230, which Google and EFF and others fought every step of the way. So it's there's a lot of history here, and in the case of the gentleman who started Backpage, they were repeatedly warned by the federal government to take affirmative action, to do much
Nope, they were
much more
not.
serious work.
They won every lawsuit, Charles. I've known this guy for
Yeah,
40 years.
they won the
They've
lawsuits,
won
but they were
every lawsuit.
right. So what ended up happening is legislation was passed. They continue to host some of this stuff, amending CDA 230, and it looks like they're going to go to jail over it. I mean, I think we'll see when the trial starts, but
Yeah, it's First Amendment. It's a First Amendment freedoms case.
yes, and there are many of us who think that the First Amendment stops at the right to traffic in children. Um, you know,
They
that's just
weren't trying to traffic in children. They supported a home for wayward girls in Los Angeles. And they took credit cards and reported the credit card numbers of child traffickers to the DOJ. And the DOJ has issued a report saying that since Backpage was shut down, they have not been able to bring one child trafficking case to justice. So there's always more to these things than meets the eye. I
yeah.
obviously
I would just
am
say
not in
on that
favor of
final point.
child traffic.
I would say on the final point, and I'll let you have the last word on this, because I mean we strongly disagree on this. I mean, I've worked with the basically the Division of Homeland Security as well as with the FBI on issues of child trafficking. I take it very, very, very seriously. In the case of Clearview, it's sort of somewhat my life's work in catching pedophiles and people who traffic in children for profit. And I should say, in the case of Backpage, there is the Clearview approach, which is we will go out of our way to help law enforcement catch pedophiles and those who traffic in children. And then
And
there's the
that
back.
that was the Backpage approach. I
Well,
mean, we don't even disagree. We were both working in the same
yeah,
direction.
yeah. I mean,
Backpage
I
was
think
doing the
the
same
evidence that they
thing.
have of the emails that are starting to come out now. I mean, I suppose we'll see when the government brings the case to trial. For what it's worth, my view is that there was such an effort to sort of get a high profile case in this post. They So I think that they do have a claim of selective prosecution, because there are, of course, other websites around the world that were trafficking in children. But I do think, I remember, they're Phoenix-based entities, if I recall, And
Correct.
I remember, various friends of mine taking them aside and warning them about trying to be even more compliant with the government. And they tried to cloak themselves in the First Amendment. And I was like, look, I don't think that's going to work. And of course, the government, has now brought a case against them and is starting to throw them in jail for quite a long time.
Okay, moving on. Next biggest article is the one that my friend Avesta mentioned, and indeed is one of the biggest stories for many people, especially anyone in crypto space, is paying very close attention to what's happening in the Senate's infrastructure bill. And the latest news, the headline from Decrypt, who's probably following this more regularly than anybody at the moment, and certainly their readers, is the crypto community at large. And the headline from Decrypt at the moment says the latest cryptocurrency compromise amendment to Senate infrastructure bill fails to reach a vote after Senator Shelby files an objection over military spending. The Senate rejected an amendment championed by the cryptocurrency industry that exempts non-custodial crypto actors, and a lot of other publications are coming out with their versions of what's happening at the moment. For example, Crypto Scoop's headline says Senate fails to amend cryptocurrency reporting requirements, moving the fight to the House. CoinDesk says Senate rejects compromise crypto tax amendment in $1 trillion infrastructure bill. What happens next? And lone senator rejects crypto provision in infrastructure bill. As I mentioned, Senator Shelby. And then you've got the Washington Post and others. Late effort to revamp cryptocurrency rules in infrastructure deal fails in the Senate, so it goes over to the House. Some guy named Jack on Twitter says Bitcoin will unite a deeply divided country and eventually the world, being the crypto messiah that he is. He also said second attempt to save fails again to desire for more military spending, because Senator Shelby files the objection over the military spending part, which is why she's objecting to the bill and why it kind of now goes to the House. And then this Jack guy is really active on Twitter. He says amendment killed to get more military spending. Wow. And go ahead, Amay.
Tyler, there is a bit of breaking news, a 600 million hack on Poly Network on the Binance Smart Chain just happened, and there's just like a whole hoopla over that because it's on the Binance Smart Chain and it's on the Polygon Matic network. So it's connected, and it's very interesting because as they're trying to do this in the House and they're fighting over all this other stuff, I just tweeted out that, this is what bounties are for. These crypto companies and DeFi companies, we have bounties. It's bounties to find exploits in contracts, but with all due respect, Tyler, you've been in tech. You know how it is to audit code when a lot of people are working on it. It's super important to get your code audited by someone that's going to be a trusted source and also someone that understands what they're looking at. Because really these exploits are happening as well because of, in my humble opinion, from what I've seen, sloppy code. And also, some ways, disgruntled folks inside the team that could also leave and actually have malice after they get maybe tossed out or whatever. But this is an interesting one because this one just recently happened and it just got tweeted out.
Tyler, yes. Donna is in the audience.
Oh, perfect. I pinged Donna actually.
Kieran.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you. Welcome back, Donna, and welcome, Kieran, and everybody on stage. We got the whole family back together. Everyone's on stage.
Welcome,
everybody. Hey, Donna. Any
Hey. Well,
what's going on?
I can update you on either thing.
Awesome.
But we're just talking about the exploit. It does show that that these particular things, whichever ones are involved, there are about 3 chains now, including Ethereum. They're not decentralized because they're talking about how they're going to roll this back. It is very, very similar to, it's sounding very similar to what was one of the first big hacks was the Dow report, with the Dow, which then became the Dow report of the SEC, which was one of the first lines in the sand of what would be. And so like this will be an evolving situation. It comes at what I would say a very bad time, in that we just had a strong support from the crypto community and from the Senate, as you just mentioned before, on supporting crypto, irrespective of the fact that one lone senator got the amendment not to be passed. But I can see Elizabeth Warren raising a flag and saying consumer protection, for these quote DeFi protocols. But we'll see what the evolving situation. There's about 900 million locked up, or there was yesterday or so, in these different poly network protocols. So that's still evolving. There was also some indication that in May, which is quite some 3 months ago, somebody indicated that there was a problem in the smart contract anyway. So it's again follows very similar to the Dow, because their Dow report, the Dow had a notice a few months before it was exploited back in 2016 that there was something wrong with the code. So that's where we are.
Okay. Thank you, Donna. So
Thanks.
stay tuned. We'll have more, every time we get there, this is an ongoing drama that we're watching closely. And now here's a new, although not so new, update that Google will let people under 18 delist photos of themselves by request. Restrict ad targeting of children based on age, gender, or interests, and more, so that advertisers can no longer target people under 18. And we saw this in Facebook about 4 days ago. You guys remember this, where Facebook came out and said in the case of Instagram that they were not going to allow, and is Michelle with us from Facebook? She can give us the gospel on this, as she's known for doing. I don't see her at the moment, but she was here when we talked about the headline the first time, which is Facebook is now stopping people from targeting teens based on their interests. So, but you could target them only on their gender or sex and age and location. So you could target 16-year-old males in Mississippi as an advertiser, but you can't target them based on the fact that they watched some particular content or have some particular website in their cookie or anything like that. So it kind of is very generic marketing. And now that was 4 days ago. And then here's today, Google essentially doing the same thing, restricting ad targeting of children, but also you can't even target them based on their age or their gender or their interest. So none of it. And also giving them the ability to delist photos. And what are the odds that they both do this in the same week? It seems a little peculiar. I mean, I can understand them doing it 4 months apart, 5 months apart, a year apart, a year or two apart, but both simultaneously, like really simultaneously.
They got the same warning.
Yeah. Did they get some kind of warning from a government agency of some kind? Similar.
No, it's the DOJ. The DOJ has made very clear that if you want to be on the side of the U.S. government, like these are the ways to do it going forward. You're either going to be a team player or not.
Right.
And it's not unlike in China. What's going on, except it's more subtle than it is in China.
Well said, because the next headline is from Variety in Hollywood, which Variety is kind of the big trade, the magazine, the publication for Hollywood. And their headline is more about YouTube, because they care more about YouTube because they're Hollywood. And the headline is YouTube launches protections for kids. Default private upload. So when you upload a video, it's private by default, not public. Turning off autoplay. So when you arrive at a video, it doesn't automatically start playing. And adding, quote unquote, take a break and bedtime reminders by default. And that very much is like China. In fact, that's surprisingly like China, because in the past week, we've seen headlines out of China from South China Morning Post, who know, because they're on the ground, that, and many others, by the way, that the gaming companies are now limiting video gameplay to 1 hour per day during the day, and not allowing minors under 18 to play video games at all past 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. And then you only get 1 hour a day between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. How do they do that? From your face. Everyone has to register their actual face, which the camera then sees your face. And if it's, if you're under 18, they know you have to register with your state ID, just as we're going to have to do in America here in the not so distant future. And, then your app turns off. Sorry, you can't, you already had your 1 hour gameplay. Hope it was fun. And with the YouTube, as Charles just said, it's rather Chinese, although in a much more subtle way. It's a bedtime reminder and a take a break reminder. I can assure you, this is not YouTube's choice to do this. This is not similar to Apple scanning the photos. Which again, when this Apple scanning photos thing story broke, 4 or 5, 6 days ago, and now this story is coming out of YouTube, suggesting to kids to take a break and bedtime reminders. This is not YouTube internally being like, you know what we should do? We should remind kids it's time for bed. You think that was YouTube's idea to do that? You think it's YouTube's idea to give a take a break reminder from YouTube, which they've spent the past decade trying to keep you on, and they have built into their model that, when you fall asleep with the phone playing, it just keeps playing video after video after video after video after video, because to them, that metric shows that, the average listener time or watch time is, much longer. So they keep the videos playing all night long as you fall asleep with your phone playing, because that's to their benefit. It's not to their benefit to put in a take a break and a bedtime reminder. And it's not to Apple's benefit that they put in a looking for child abuse images in your phone. What's going on? As Charles says, it is kind of Chinese, but in a softer kind of a way. Where
I mean, I favor this for what it's worth, and
you favor both of them. I know. I'm not. I'm not making
just to be clear about
I
this,
understand. Yeah. We're gonna if we could take a vote on it to see who's on what side. It doesn't really matter. Ultimately, what matters is recognizing that something's going on behind the scenes as the big tech companies in the U.S., Google, Amazon, Facebook, what have you, are obviously meeting with the government and talking regularly now, because the government passed 5 new bills, actually 6, aimed at curtailing, limiting the powers and influence of the big tech companies. And so it was reported widely all over every publication that matters that the big tech companies are now spending a considerable hundreds of millions of dollars in lobbying and wanting to influence these bills that are kind of aimed at their throats. And so there clearly is a lot of conversation and a whole lot of desire and interest on behalf of the tech companies to have conversations with the policymakers. And while these conversations are clearly happening at the moment, obviously there's a whole lot of conversations and meetings happening between big tech and K Street, which is an American term for, Congress or kind of the lobbying industry. And interesting that as these conversations are happening, we're seeing things like this. YouTube announcing take a break and bedtime reminders for their users. Google delisting photos of minors. People have been begging for this since Google began in 2000, 20 years ago, of like, you've got photos of me I don't want. Can I take them down? Google be like, yeah, right. Fuck that. Never once have they ever entertained that. Only in some bizarre cases of some European country that's forcing Google to do this would they ever consider doing it. So the fact that Google's now voluntarily, yeah, sure, you want to take something down, you can take it down. Say what? Since when have you ever had that position? This is like, who are you, Google? This is not the Google you've been for the past 20 years. All of a sudden you're doing that and restricting and shocking, again, the bizarre coincidence that Facebook and Google both simultaneously deciding, you know what? Let's restrict ad targeting to kids. Huh? In the simultaneously, Google and Facebook, the 2 biggest digital ad networks on the planet, both simultaneously decide to do that. Self-inflicted wounds.
And Apple.
Yeah.
And Apple essentially taking a hit on the privacy thing for essentially.
Well, that's my point. What are the odds that these
all three?
What are the odds that all these big tech companies are all of a sudden self-flagellating on issues that they were never even remotely flexible about in the past? It's really quite interesting.
It's interesting, too, that Barack Obama recently said that his biggest regret of his presidency wasn't being harder on the tech companies. And then you see Biden's not making that same mistake.
But I remember when Barack was campaigning the first election, and he did a lot of dinners in Silicon Valley. And I had friends organizing a lot of those dinners.
Indeed. And he also, there's also all sorts of sketchy shit that took place in 2012 with Facebook and Obama. And I think you're quite right. I think what you're going to start to see, and you're seeing this with all the lawsuits that are going on in the state's attorneys general, where they are appealing the lawsuit being tossed against Facebook. And I think you're starting to see a lot more AGs and others, come forward and actually see going after the big tech companies as a path to political power. And I remember, 10 years ago, I met with a colleague who later became free, and he told me that he thought that the path to basically higher political office was to go full Teddy Roosevelt on the tech companies. And now he's a U.S. senator, and people talk about him running for president. So he's very much following a playbook there. And I think we're going to start to see more and more of this as time goes on both the Democrats and the Republican side.
Isn't Citizens United the root cause?
That's where I feel like it all fell apart. Anyway.
Well, Citizens United was a case that was funded by Rebecca Mercer, who in turn, has funded Cambridge Analytica and Parler. And there's some questions as to her relationship with the Russians. I lead people to Google that, given its involvement. But yes, the rise of dark money, basically having money that's not disclosable, has oftentimes been used by foreign actors to influence U.S. elections, and even things like who ends up on the federal courts, because you can donate to these 501c4 organizations as corporations and not have to disclose your donors.
Okay, so the next headline is from the New York Times. This is like now the fifth or sixth biggest story on the internet at this very moment. And it's a New York Times article with the headline, "Inside the Rift Between the White House and Facebook." Like I said, they're all talking but this is over the vaccine misinformation. Of course, everyone will remember Joe Biden made a comment in reference to Facebook that they're killing people with the vaccine misinformation. And obviously there's a rift between the White House and Facebook over vaccine misinformation as the administration, meaning Joe Biden's team, grew frustrated with Facebook's lack of transparency. That's the headline from the New York Times. Frustrations grew behind the scenes among top leaders on both sides, potentially hurting the government's efforts to overcome the pandemic. So I'm going to retweet that out. Copy link. Sending it to the Twitter account, by the way, where we tweet all of these articles, is TNATW. You can see it in my photo above my head there. And in this case, just popping this one open for a second, it says, in March, Andy Slavitt, then a top pandemic advisor to President Biden, called Nick Clegg, Facebook's vice president of global affairs, and delivered an anonymous warning. For weeks, Mr. Slavitt and other White House officials had been meeting with Facebook, told you they were meeting, to urge the company to stop spread of misinformation about the coronavirus vaccines. Many Americans who refused to get vaccinated had cited false stories they read on Facebook, including theories that the shots could lead to infertility, stillborn babies, and autism. Mr. Slavitt and other officials felt that the executives were deflecting blame and resisting requests for information. In 8 weeks' time, Mr. Slavitt told Mr. Clegg, Facebook will be number one story of the pandemic. Mr. Slavitt's prediction was not far off. Roughly 3 months later, with cases from Delta variant surging, Mr. Biden said Facebook was killing people, a comment that put the social network in the center of the public discussion about the virus. Mr. Biden's comment, which he later walked back slightly, was culmination of increasingly combative meetings with the company. Told you they were meeting about the spread of misinformation, interviews with administration officials, Facebook employees, and other people with knowledge of the internal discussions revealed new details about who took part in the talks and the issues that fed the frustrations between the White House and the Silicon Valley titan. The meetings have involved the top ranks on both sides, according to the people, including those close to Facebook and those with ties to the administration, who would only speak anonymously because of the conversations were private. In March, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook chief executive, called Ron Klain, the White House chief of staff, and discussed health misinformation. The White House grew so frustrated by Facebook's answers in the internal meetings that at one point it demanded to hear from the data scientists at the company instead of lobbyists. And the nation's top doctor presented the social media representatives with anecdotes from doctors and nurses who had interacted with COVID-19 patients who believed incorrect information. Talks between the White House and Facebook continue. Told you. They keep telling you how often these guys are meeting. But the rift has complicated an already tumultuous relationship. Just as Mr. Biden faces setbacks on fighting the coronavirus, the White House missed its goal of having 70% of American adults with at least one vaccination shot by July 4th, and the highly contagious Delta variant has fueled a rise in cases since then. The U.S. averaged more than 110,000 new cases daily in the past week, up from 13,000 a month ago. In response, the administration has reversed some public health advice, leaving many Americans perplexed over requirements like wearing masks. Anywho, I just tweeted that out. If you want to, I only touched the beginning of that.
Tyler?
Yes.
very briefly with things. So I just to say upfront with things. I'm double vaccinated and encourage everyone to get their vaccinations. One of the things that's caused a lot of this essentially misinformation is there is a root nugget of truth that was never accounted for in history of involuntary sterilizations by the United States government that basically makes many of the conventions qualify for genocide. Because that was never acknowledged historically, we keep having to revisit this bullshit with mistruths around these items. If the government was ever able to basically have a time basically through the archives and honestly account for that, it would really actually restore an enormous amount of trust with what we need to do with the actions right now. But that the conflections of this, because we haven't had honest accounting of that historically, means that we're conflating the actions that we have to take right now. So anyways, I just, it's frustrating because here's the problem I see. When we start basically removing these pieces of information with things, like very much like lab leak theory got buried for a while because that was politically inconvenient, there is actual legitimate history that will be buried with this because it will be politically inconvenient for the current era. And then as that keeps being buried, it means that it's going to cause these things to flare up again. When someone says, oh no, I found a nugget of something, that must mean, and they jump into 100 other false accusations that have nothing to do with the core original nugget. So this false information isn't just the stuff we're dealing with right now. It's essentially stuff that's happened in history, and it's what we're going to be establishing for the future. So it's really important that we get this right. And censorship is going to be... I understand the vaccine. Everyone needs to get vaccinated, but this is we're playing with fire here, not just with the current vaccine, but all the ones that come after it. So it's really troubling to see how easily they tech companies cave on this.
I think we also need to be careful here too, because what if the FDA and what if the government health authorities are wrong? I mean, they were wrong historically about HIV/AIDS. I mean, Fauci once claimed, for instance, that HIV/AIDS could be caused through casual transmission, which people can look up. And there have been all sorts of instances of the FDA saying things like opioids were okay for you. There's a long history of basically the politicization of medicine. I think the Biden administration, and I've talked to people around DC about this, but I think they're actually using the pretext of misinformation about the coronavirus to achieve other policy objectives of theirs, which is to bring Facebook to heel. And I don't think it's a coincidence that this book, An Ugly Truth About the History of Facebook, has now been making the rounds and become a bestseller. I think they're setting up the takedown of Facebook. You'll notice that you don't really hear anything about Netflix or even Amazon. You don't really hear anything about them being bad companies. It's just Google and Facebook exclusively that seem to be getting all the attention. Notwithstanding the unionization efforts.
Your mic cut out, Charles.
Oh, I said notwithstanding the union efforts against Amazon.
Yeah,
but I do think we should just be very mindful here that this is kind of like a larger trend that we're seeing, that it's very hard for global companies to please everyone all the time. And I think that's going to be it's going to be a very common refrain that we're going to see over and over again during the Biden years, where the U.S. government says to the tech companies that they want them to jump. And I think they're learning a lot from how other countries are going after American tech companies.
Yeah, that's my point, is they've noticed what happens in India. They see how the tech companies all, when India says jump, they all say how high. So I wanted to welcome Azita and Abran to the stage as kind of non-regulars to the stage, maybe regulars in the audience, but in any case, welcome to Tech News Around the World. And feel free to jump in. Everybody else on stage at this moment is a friend of Tech News, but so you two are unique.
Thanks, Tyler. I appreciate it. Yeah, often listener, never get a chance to really jump on stage. I just like to get my recaps of what's going on in the world. But I'm a frequenter in other rooms around AI and contributor to Tech Talks with Chris Chang. And just wanted to give you guys a heads up that there's a new AI model being announced today by OpenAI. They're going to do a Twitch event at 10 a.m. Pacific to introduce the model, and then we're going to do a recap and discuss with I'm an OpenAI dev ambassador, so myself and some other dev ambassadors who have been using the model and testing it out for some weeks now. We're going to do a kind of this discussion on the AI at 8:30 tonight in Tech Talks.
Cool.
So pop in.
Can you give us, what do you expect? Is it? Does anyone have an idea what they're going to announce?
Well, I can't say yet until 1 o'clock. I'm still under NDA, but everyone else is feel free to speculate. But if you've been paying attention to some of their blogs or some of the things that have been leaked, you could kind of piece it together, or we can kind of jump back in and talk about it after 1 o'clock my time Eastern.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. So Azita.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love being in this room and all the things you guys teach me every morning and in this morning time here.
Oh, very kind.
I have a quick question. Just to give you a little bit of a background, I work with undergraduate students, engineers, and so a lot of these tech things that you talk about are really relevant. And I also am on the board of the ethics division at the American Society of Engineering Education. So I have a couple of questions as I'm listening to everything that you're talking about, particularly the YouTube news. And I think this is awesome that you're sharing all of this. My question is, my background being in management, we often talk about shareholder stakeholder theory and the myths around the two, that companies are about profit making, and the trend as we move forward with particularly the newer generation is the awareness that they have about all of the things that you're talking about. The discussion is around, people are not going to make any changes unless government steps in and puts through regulations, which we have seen. But I'm wondering, is it possible that as, hands change and the culture of some of these organizations change, that sometimes these companies are making proactive moves? Now, I understand that some of them, for lack of better words, there's greenwashing and they just kind of want to, they want people to know, but they're not really doing it. But is it possible that perhaps the YouTube of the old versus the YouTube as it has evolved, that some of these members are thinking about the stakeholders, the end user, you and I, that, or the children? Is it possible that that may be going on? And I'm curious to hear from, everybody, especially you, in terms of whether that is possible at this point.
It's certainly anything's possible. It would just be uncharacteristic given the history thus far. And you strike me as an optimist, and
not really.
No, okay. But I think you're right. I think inevitably, given the generational change, I think I think you're right that if the market evolves generationally in the way that I agree with your assessment that it is going to move that direction, and at some point they will need to make those changes, and it could be that these changes are a preemptive move to get on the good side of the inevitable history to come, but it would be slightly uncharacteristic given everything we've seen thus far. So maybe it is.
Well, isn't it true, Tyler, that Microsoft changed a lot of its behavior and practices as a function of the DOJ investigation back in the day, and that alone was enough for them to kind of cease and desist on some of their worst practices.
Well said,
Well, are
Evan.
we
Well said.
on the cusp? Are we on the cusp of a trend, starting with the EU's GDPR and now with India's positioning on Twitter and Amazon, where large foreign markets can actually drive American policy in a Me Too kind of fashion? Is that not a phenomenon that's starting to be replicated?
That's an interesting thought. I've never really thought about that. And I guess my underlying question is it always, and again, I have this debate all the time and I don't know the answer. So the question for me is it always that the government needs to step in for people to start becoming mindful and doing things that are for the good of society or those around them, employees included? And you're right, it's not characteristic, but as we are training or working with a new generation who is genuinely concerned about the future, is it possible that these things can change in the opposite direction? So now we're going to compete because we want to be the good guy. We want to be the one that sets the trends. I don't know. Right. I really don't know. I'm Azita and I'm done speaking.
Thank you, Azita. I think one point I'd bring up is, they're public companies and they kind of have to walk a tightrope between what, improving the quarterly reports, which we just went through, by the way. We just finished the Q2 announcements for all of the publicly traded companies. And, that's a vicious game that they're caught up in, of having to continually have better metrics each quarter over quarter over quarter, and so it's quite uncharacteristic for them to do something that would potentially impact next quarter's results, and they're quite short-sighted in that regard. And we don't. There are companies who do have a non-quarter to quarter perspective, and Tesla would be one of them, where Elon famously told an investor during a phone call, "Sell our stock. You're not the right investor for us. We don't think quarter to quarter. We don't make our moves quarter to quarter." And you sound like you're one of those typical investors that's based on everything must go up and to the right all the time. So please sell the stock. And Google's not one of those companies that's like Elon. That Google and Facebook and the others are a much more quarter to quarter type traditional, corporate entity that is beheld to the shareholders more than to the future employees, for lack of a better word, the to be the nice place to work, because there is a weird phenomena as in looking at IBM in America and more recently Microsoft, where they get to a certain level of incredible strength and economic prowess, and then they start getting cracked down on by the government. Microsoft most notably comes to mind. They were kind of the one that really ran up against this in a very public way, similar to the way that the current tech giants are today. And then there's this strange the charisma of the company kind of starts to fade. It's no longer this glorious rocket ship to the moon. All of a sudden it's this actor who isn't always doing great things all the time, and a lot of kind of negative stuff starts seeping out in disgruntled ex-employees, and it turns into it loses its panache, to simplify it. And so I think that this is more to do with these conversations that New York Times article made abundantly clear that Facebook is clearly talking with Joe Biden and his team very, very regularly. And so maybe it's not a coincidence, when there are issues like countries where there's disagreements, where they disagree, like in this issue around misinformation around COVID, but there's other areas where the administration might say, hey, what about children, sexual exploitation? Isn't this a place where we could actually do something good together? And Facebook says, yeah, sure, okay. Or in Apple's case, yeah, okay, yeah, we could scan our images for that or whatever. I'm of the mind that this is the fact that Apple and Google and Facebook all simultaneously are all talking with the governments and are all making these interesting changes that they normally would not do self-inflictedly. If it were only one company doing this, I might say I would be more inclined to take your perspective that maybe this is kind of a altruistic kind of a thing. But given that all three of them are doing it, that really makes it an interesting moment and point to consider. But we will know the answers to this in the near future. That's the beauty of this game, and that's why we watch this almost like a sports event, where it's kind of we're watching this day by day and watching the dramas unfold. And sometimes the hints and the answers come from very unassuming, unsuspected corners of the web, as we've seen in tech news. Yeah, Charles?
And let's just keep in mind that Joe Biden's president now, so it gives a lot more wiggle room to a lot of these companies that have sort of progressive staff, progressive employees, and so there's a lot more that can be done. Whereas when Trump was president, they could very much give the finger to Trump and have attaboys from their shareholders or from some of their staff. And so now that Biden's president, he can actually wrestle a lot more concessions out of them than probably could previously have been extracted. And so I think we're going to see much more of this as time goes on. And I would be very surprised. I mean, I think the next sort of issue to watch is the sort of sweetheart deals that Facebook has with various players, like Ben Shapiro at the Daily Wire, which is one of the top performing sites on Facebook. And there's sort of some questions about, was there a sweetheart deal between Jared Kushner and of course Mark Zuckerberg, which is something that those of us who know the Facebook board members note that to be largely true. So I think we're going to see a lot more clam book, You're going to see a lot more rules and restrictions put into place, either de facto or de jure, either forced by courts or forced by sort of backroom deals. And I don't see there being any strategy around that. And I should say too, like, part of the problem here is Zuckerberg is himself unaccountable because of the dual stock, nature of Facebook. He can't really be fired unless he wants to be fired. And so he's able to acquire things like WhatsApp, like Oculus, or kill things. And that's a real problem, and it makes him a real bad actor. And I think, the more you see sort of negative journalism, it's really, Facebook and Google are the companies that the government's coming after in a very serious way. And you'll see them try to placate the government, but oftentimes, it all comes down to the CEO and whether or not the CEO will actually.
You're having a weird thing happening where the end of your sentences get cut off, Charles. And if I don't think I'm the only one.
Oh,
Yeah.
weird. All right.
That's right. You get right to the last word, and then your last word fades off. I don't know if it's like an audio setting or something. Anyway, so a couple of headlines that we got to jump through. Numbers 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 are ones from the Financial Times. That
Hey,
yes,
Tyler. Tyler, sorry to interrupt. Could I just ask Charles a quick question based on his last statement that really got my wheels spinning? Is there a potential of some sort of legislation that when a company becomes so big that they're truly a platform with, monopolistic kinds, not necessarily a monopoly, but monopolistic kinds of authority, that the governance structure would be subject to a higher level of oversight to prevent autocratic behavior on what has become a public platform of the nature that you just described in Facebook? Is anybody in the policy? I wish Justin were here, but is anybody in the policy domain? Is that a credible future play to manage these natural monopoly kinds of platforms?
So my understanding, I now sort of live in the Northern Virginia area these days, and so I've spoken with a lot of people about these issues. And my understanding is that the basic view that the Biden folks have is that monopolies aren't necessarily a bad thing, so long as the monopoly acts as a good actor and acts in the national interest. So historically, the United States has tolerated monopolies in the past, things like AT&T, because they have been in the national interest. You don't want your communications platforms, to be sort of, historically, you don't want your communications platforms to be broken up in all these different companies, because that might not actually work for the purposes of defeating, say, the Soviet Union. In this particular case, what they're basically doing is they're saying, look, there are good actors and there are bad actors in the tech monopoly world. And the good actors like Amazon, who are allowed to host things like, the CIA's contracts, right? We'll be happy to work with them. The good actors will be things like Netflix. We'll be happy to work with them. The bad actors like Facebook and Google will have to put more. So you're seeing things, and you're seeing this in the court system as well, where you're seeing lawsuits against Facebook and Google in different ways than they previously would have under previous administrations, be they Republican or Democrat. So I think the way to think about this is not so much a legislation issue. It's more like on the regulator side, on the FTC side. I mean, Tyler's talked about this, recently, where there was the issue over the NYU lab basically going after the business model of Facebook. And I think basically the thing you're going to see is Facebook's business model come under just tremendous pressure. And so I don't think this is one of those things where it's sort of like a one size fits all, legislation fix will solve the issue. I mean, remember, a lot of these tech companies, they get, they donate millions and millions of dollars politically. So this is sort of something outside of the political, side of things. And you're seeing this with recently, where essentially the SEC, various parts of the government are clamping down on crypto. And so I think we're going to see more and more of that sort of thing as time comes to pass.
Hey, can I jump in on that 100% agree with what Charles just said. And also for people, my understanding is it's not just tech that they're looking at. So as he said, there's good monopolies and the ones that they aren't in favor of, but we've definitely supported monopolies. They're also starting to look at them across the board, and that ag tech and the big agricultural monopolies are also under scrutiny right now.
Okay.
The food industry is
Well,
under tremendous pressure. Yep.
and a quick follow-up question for Charles. So I wasn't so much suggesting that they be broken down as monopolies, but that their internal governance structures be subject to some sort of mechanism that prevents an extreme autocracy, such as what we see at Facebook. I can only imagine that there are active voices in Google, Facebook, Microsoft, who are in the minority, who take what we would consider to be more enlightened positions, but can't really activate their voice in the governance structure. So I was thinking more not of necessarily breaking up monopolies, because monopolies can be like Mabel and so forth, can be in the best interests in terms of the efficiency of the markets, but more at the governance structure than at breaking up the monopoly.
Right. I mean, the dual stock nature is something that's coming under a lot of review these days, but whether or not legislation can solve that. And for those who don't know, like, in the case of Facebook, there are dual stock, basically it, Mark Zuckerberg has a majority, I think, of it's like class A shares. And so that's a different thing than when you as an investor buy Facebook stock. You obviously don't get a say on what happens. And so some of these companies have decided, under the idea that founder-run companies are better for long-term growth, which is true, by the way, like just empirically, that seems to actually be true of the tech companies. Some of them have decided that they should create a separate class of shares, which makes it harder for things like activists, investors, and others to out them, to basically push them out of their own companies. And so there are, pluses and minuses to that. The danger, of course, is like, you'll end up in a situation like with Facebook, where essentially, even if every single person in Facebook doesn't like what Mark Zuckerberg is doing, he can still do whatever he wants without any accountability. Now, there are ways, of course, of bringing accountability to Facebook, but through the legal means and through lawsuits and sort of other vectors of attack, and to put pressure on the company so that he changes his way. But as it stands right now, under the corporate form, there's really no change there. And I think you're going to see, there'll be some attempts to sort of break up these companies through FTC action. We haven't really seen what Ms. Khan wants to do at FTC yet, but Jennifer's quite right about the food processors as well. So it's a space to really watch, seriously, and it's something we're going to be talking about over the next few years, and more during.
Okay. So I want to jump into some more headlines here. New York Times has an article. Oh no, Financial Times. Sorry. Amazon says it will pay $1,000 in damages for dangerous goods sold by third-party merchants starting September 1st. More than half of products sold on the platform come from third parties and are not vetted by the e-commerce giant. Amazon will start directly paying compensations of up to $1,000 for dangerous goods. And then Nikkei Asia out of Tokyo has the headline about App Annie. App Annie is tracks the data around apps, who's been downloaded the most and everything like that, as nearly every app owner, every app startup knows. And so App Annie says that TikTok was the most downloaded app globally in 2020, displacing Facebook-owned apps for the first time since 2018. Data protection becoming more important as consumers demand privacy. A global survey of downloads in 2020 shows TikTok, a video sharing app developed in China, as the number one downloaded app. And next is about Twitter, and this is from Twitter's own website. An analysis of the tweets about Euro 2020, including the racist abuse towards England players, which came out at the very end during the shoot-off, where England essentially lost in a very, very incredibly close shootout at the very end of Euro 2020, and where many of the upset English fans took to Twitter to express a lot of very racist thoughts. And Twitter's analysis of those tweets say that 99% of the accounts that they suspended for racism were not anonymous, and most abuse came from the UK. Well, that makes sense. They were UK fans, after all, who were very upset. So, so the fact that they came from the UK is not a surprise at all. What is kind of surprising is that 99% of them were not anonymous, because normally, if you're going to say something that could get your account banned, you might do it anonymously. Anywho, so the next article is a really interesting one, also about Twitter. Twitter's photo cropping algorithm has been a subject of debate amongst AI ethicists, because people have been playing around with this Twitter's photo cropping, which they do kind of auto-magically for you, because you have a long photo in portrait mode, like a selfie, and they have to crop it because they need to showcase only the most important part of the photo in your tweet. And of course, if people click on your...
Well, they used to. They stopped cropping, right? So.
No. Well, they still have to crop. If you do a traditional portrait, they might not need to crop it now. But what these AI ethicists are doing is doing triple long, quadruple long portrait mode photos that are ridiculously, impossibly long, to force Twitter to crop it. So they don't have a choice. They can't show a mile long photo. So they intentionally feed in these ridiculously long photos that forces Twitter's algorithm to crop it. And they put two faces in the photo, one at the top of the photo, one at the bottom of the photo. The algorithm is smart enough to realize we should probably show one of these two faces. The question is, which of these two faces should we show? The one at the top or the one at the bottom? Well, you might assume, let's show the one at the top. Maybe that's more relevant. Turns out the top and the bottom isn't what's driving the selection. It's other more interesting characteristics. And what people have been testing this thoroughly, and they test, is it a racial issue if we show, two white face, or is it a gender issue? Is it an age issue? And now one of the interesting things that they're finding is it's even a beauty issue, is that you take the same person, like Evan, you take and then you put Evan through Facetune and you make him look like he lost 10 kilograms, and then that's more likely to be shown.
How dare I?
So talk to the algorithm. So
we love you just the way you are, Evan.
So it turns out that Twitter's algorithms are not only misogynist and racist, they're also ableist and fittest. I don't know what the word is for choosing more beautiful people over ugly people. But it's somebody found this, and
why is this a bad thing? Is this a bad thing?
I mean, it's not. It's an interesting thing, and the person who found this was just awarded the $3,500 prize for determining that a key Twitter algorithm favors faces that are of the same individual, that are slimmer and quote unquote more beautiful. And it's, people are just deconstructing the algorithm in ways that Twitter itself didn't necessarily know, or they're claiming they didn't know anyways, because
I'm sure they didn't know.
Vinay?
But I don't think it's necessarily a good thing, right? We're reinforcing certain tropes in terms of what is beauty, what is desirable, what is aesthetic. So, Charles, you asked if it's bad. Maybe, maybe not, but I don't necessarily think that it's good as it relates to identity and perception and esteem.
I mean, TikTok, right, famously selects a lot of people that are very attractive. Mm-hmm. to be in its system, and this might be another example of how the American tech companies, are a bit more like the Chinese than they would care to admit.
That I would agree with.
Breaking news.
Go ahead,
Twitter.
Vinay.
Okay, just broke news 3 hours ago in India. Twitter is now complying with India's new IT rules. New Delhi government told the court on Tuesday, in a move that is expected to ease month-long tension between American social media network and the government of the key overseas market. So a lawyer representing the Indian government told the Delhi High Court that Twitter's recent steps have made the social network prima facie compliant with the new law. So Twitter is off the hook in India now.
Yes, boss. You got it, boss. Whatever you say, boss. You want us to do what, boss? You got it, boss. You the boss, Modi. Yeah, of course they're going to do whatever Modi wants them to do. They didn't have a choice. What are they going to do? Turn down billions of dollars just so that they can, not have to delete a few tweets what's the point of that? We sure showed them. We didn't delete those 10 tweets they asked us not to delete, and we just lost billions of dollars. That'll teach you, Modi. Yeah, of course they're going to do whatever Modi says. They're greedy bastards at the end of the day. They're a public company. Can you imagine a public company trying to explain to their investors, you know what? Let's just skip India. How's that sound, everybody? I know it's it's hundreds of billions of dollars over the next decade. I know. I hear you. But you know what? Let's just skip it. Let's just not do India. I mean, you'd be fired as the CEO the next day. So they don't really have a choice. They have to do what Modi says, even if they disagree with it on moral, ethical, legal grounds, whatever. So it's interesting.
If I'm Modi, I keep humiliating them over and over and over again and just see how far I can go while boosting coup the whole time. Because what do I care if some American company, I mean, albeit Vijay Gandhi, who's Jack Dorsey's second in command, is Indian born, but like, what do I care if, I help this American company make a bunch of money? I probably humiliate them as much as possible. And maybe I even do what Uganda did, which is ban Twitter outright ahead of an election just to make them know who's boss.
Nigeria banned them, yeah. So the next big article is, we did Twitter's photo cropping. Salesforce launches Salesforce Plus, a free streaming service aimed at business professionals with original programming from Salesforce and eventually its clients. Salesforce is the latest tech giant to venture into video streaming with the launch of a new service aimed at business professionals, which begs the question, will it be about selling content, perhaps? It's from the article.
Well, it's all about content. Yeah. It's all about content marketing. No one wants to be sold to, period. Yeah. So it's all about creating good content and getting their buyers engaged that way. And, even Benioff bought Time Magazine, right? I mean, that was
the service is part of a greater effort to transition Salesforce's marketing approach from paid customer acquisition to owned and operated media. Franklin says the hope is that the content will help people refine their skills while also creating an emotional connection to Salesforce, driving users to want to use our products and want to engage with us more. Salesforce Plus which will debut globally during Salesforce's annual mega conference Dreamforce in September, is a free service that will feature original programming from Salesforce and eventually content created by its clients. The content will be available on demand 24/7. You mean like YouTube? The company has hired around 50 editorial leads to help launch the service, including scriptwriters, broadcast, blah, blah, blah. It plans to fill many editorial roles and must come. More broadly, there are hundreds of people at Salesforce currently working on Salesforce Plus across marketing, product, and digital departments. For now, they say the company has no plans to sell ads around the content or charge for it. Yes.
So, Tyler, how about a Tech News Around the World
channel?
Do
it.
We could pitch you to
Let's do it. So, I happen to know the chief digital officer at Salesforce, Brian, who, by the way, is dear friends with Jeremiah, who joins us nearly every day. And if Jeremiah might be in the audience, I know Brian very well personally, but Jeremiah and Brian are best BFFs, as we say. Salesforce has built its own in-house studio called Salesforce Studios to film and produce content, which will feature stories they say are meant to be entertaining and inspirational at the same time, and also help you learn things. While Salesforce, there you go, Salesforce Plus. They've started 6 original series like Leading Through Change, The Inflection Point, and Boss Talks, and Simply Put. And we can have a little chat with Brian and see if they'll let us do Tech News Around the World there as part of their content. That could be cool. So the next one is from Taylor Lorenz at the New York Times, which is the New York Times, resident social media geek. And she wrote a post that went a bit viral today because it talks about a new sort of trend that Courtney Love, of all people, called out on Instagram about text-heavy meme posts, often paired with nonsensical, low-quality images, have begun sweeping through Instagram, largely thanks to Gen Z accounts. And the idea is that people are even starting to think in terms of memes instead of thinking in terms of witty comments that one might make at dinner parties or over coffee with friends. People are now starting to spend their brain power cycles, their spare cerebral cycles, thinking about memes, because that's what gets you follows and attention on social media. It's kind of an interesting thought. The next headline is SoftBank's Vision Fund reports its Q1 profit of $2.14 billion and says it made 47 new investments worth $14 billion. Facebook and Microsoft are no longer listed as investments. On Tuesday, they reported a 39% fall in first quarter net profit, even as Vision Fund returns were boosted by listings during the period. Google adds NFC to its Titan security key lineup. I told you this was coming. Did I or did I not predict that Google would be coming out with a actual physical hardware key for your device as a replacement for passwords? Cheryl? Cal would remember. I know Cal would remember. And I even told you that the source of this physical key is actually a company from Stockholm called YubiKey.
Yeah, you
yes.
mentioned.
Well, now.
And the IP behind that is from Archetype IP Limited, and that was founded in 2007.
There we go.
By
thank you, Nicholas.
Yours truly.
Fantastic.
Welcome back, Nicholas.
Yes, welcome back, Nicholas.
Hey,
Yes.
Tyler. There were two big items out of that SoftBank story that I just wanted to highlight. One was that SoftBank is actually, it just came out maybe like an hour ago on CNBC and CNN. There were two things. One was SoftBank is actually pulling back. I mean, the words were very strong. I don't have the quote in front of me, but in a significant way on their Chinese investment strategy. So they're actually pulling out their investment strategy on the Vision Fund 2 was to really bet heavily on emerging economies, specifically China and India. It means multiple things. One is they're pulling out of China significantly, according to the CNN article.
Yeah.
And then the
we're going to get to that. There's a Cheryl found Cheryl found a fantastic quote from Masayoshi-san about China that we'll get to.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yep.
And then the
that's
other
from
one,
Nikkei Asia is more neutral.
Yeah, and then the other one was about how they offloaded billions of dollars in stock between March and June from Microsoft, Facebook, Alphabet, and Netflix. And that was also reported in the last hour.
Okay.
Well,
Tyler.
It's under FBI investigation, right? So
exactly,
that's probably what that means. That they're SoftBank is in real trouble, and those who are watching this should also look at any of the companies that got lots of SoftBank money, because they too may well be in trouble.
And that's, I think, what Charles is talking about is what I was alluding to also, is that this may be related to some of the issues that they've had in terms of pump and dump, right, Charles? Is that what you're referring to, that how the FBI is coming after them around a significant
flurry? If you look at the history of SoftBank and SoftBank's you will see some of this come up. I mean, if you look at the WeWork situation, one way to view the WeWork fiasco is as a story of basically, investor greed and investor fraud. Another way to look at it is that the best friend of Jared Kushner, whose father-in-law was in the White House, was being paid a bribe through SoftBank, which of course has as one of its largest investors the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund. So I think we're beginning to see things turn against SoftBank, and SoftBank is starting to go into new markets. I mean, it's done well in Latin America, but essentially it doesn't really believe in the future of China, and it's essentially barred from investing in the United States while things are getting cleared up.
Okay.
Another piece of that story is around Oscar Health and their investment in Oscar as well, since that's Jared Kushner's brother.
Well, I have
Yeah, I mean,
the
I think
CTO is a dear friend of mine.
People
Frederick.
really need to look at is this. Yeah, I mean, the Oscar stuff. There's all questions starting to pop up about Oscar, and Cadre too is another one, which is part of the Kushner empire that's under some pressure, which is ostensibly a real estate tech play. And let's not forget the Kushner family had a lot of properties that were a situation. So there's going to be a lot of attention there as time goes on.
Okay, Nicholas, you were saying about the Google key.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the next launch after Verus is going to be the value chain, where we're going to take the intellectual property that is the foundation of the ecosystem, as we call it, which is that you will need a simple.
I've never heard that phrase.
A simple device that is inert, does not require batteries, etc., which, as you rightly say, Yubico and the FIDO Alliance have all been using without us litigating against them, although they are on notice. And we will be giving that to the public. That's the IP that we're going to mutualize and demonstrate that you can take intellectual property from small companies and you can mutualize it with the public and give the public the ability to do that so that they will be able to use those keys to protect their sovereign identity. And that will be a constitutional right because it will come with the patents and it will come with the licensing fees. So the community that will be the worldwide community will own that IP and Google will pay you licensing fees to make those keys.
Okay.
That's the next wave of this innovation.
Okay, so this headline about it says Google's new security key won't make you choose between USB-C and NFC. I guess meaning it does both. And Google announced updates to its security key lineup on Monday, simplifying it by removing a product and bringing NFC to all its keys. The company will now offer two options. One has a USB-A connector, and one has a USB-C, and both have NFC for connecting to most mobile devices. The USB-A key costs $30. USB-C costs $35. They go on sale August 10th. One of the biggest changes in Google's new lineup, by the way, Google's basically every Google employee across Google now uses these, and they started out by using Yubico, the YubiKey from Stockholm, who and then they realized this is very secure indeed, and they want to get rid of passwords generally. And anyway, the article goes on for quite a while about, according to Google support documents, its security keys can be used to protect your Google account as well as third-party apps and services that support the FIDO standards. I guess that's what you're talking about, the Yubico.
Yeah, that's called Fast Identity Online. It's a it's a industry body that adopted the keys.
They and other security keys from companies like Yubico can act as second factors to secure your account, even if an attacker obtains your username and password. They also fight back against phishing since they won't authenticate a login to fake websites that's trying to steal your credentials. The keys also work with Google's Advanced Protection Program, which is designed to provide extra security to people whose accounts may be targeted. And you can read and actually not only read about it, but see these physical keys from the Twitter account that I'm tweeting out now. Yeah,
brilliant. So just so that everyone understands, the one of the things that goes around identity is that you need to make it accessible to everybody, including people that may not have a mobile phone. And this is one of those things when we patented this device and this apparatus, including NFC, RFID, biometrics, etc., back in 2006-07. That's when I started down the cryptography road, was with this product. We realized that you would need something that it doesn't have a battery and you can plug it into any device with a USB. And then, of course, with NFC, it makes it accessible with Apple devices because Apple uses something called the MFI jack. That's their that's why they don't move from to USB-C in their mobile phones, and they've done it in their other devices. So it is the final piece of the architecture that you need because you have to have something that's simple and applicable. The difference is you see they're charging $30 for their keys. The keys that will be available under the public patents that we will mutualize through the value chain, those keys will drop to $1 or less a piece so that everybody in the world can afford to get a key that will protect them, that will log them in if they want to, and it has full applicability under ID 2020, etc. So the combination of a hardware key plus self-sovereign identity is all you need to be free of the technocracy. So it's amazing to see it come around right now, and it's going to just slot in perfectly with the public's alternative.
So you're actually in a interesting, but you're kind of applauding the fact that they will popularize this. Kind of do the hard work of popularizing it.
Well, people used to laugh at me when I would show them the USBs and say, this is what's going to end up securing you, as part and parcel of everything. And they were like, oh, USB is rubbish. And I was, 2015, they launched USB-C. And that was my contention that that was the last port of the internet and that we'd reached that position. And we owned this HID protocol, which we'd patented pre-Satoshi. That's how I was in those conversations. And this is how long it takes to bring a technology to the public that, becomes the solution, because everyone realizes that every other solution is controlled by the device. So you need something separate to the device, and you need it to be yours, and you need it not to pose a danger to you if you lose it, and all of which required that we needed to build the software. So I've had the hardware patent since the early days, and then we needed a way to mutualize those patents because I didn't want to be a troll. So it was, how do you then take your IP rights, like an NFT, and mutualize those with the public? So you can think of it as that has been the journey that I've been on. And what's exciting is that, you have to have the competition there, which they've been selling these keys at $30 to $50. But now they're going to meet the public, and the public will have a right to say, well, you owe us on every single key that you've manufactured in the past. Plus, this becomes a way to bootstrap a network so that you, the public, have a constitutional right under Section 8, which is what patents give you. And we have the patents all over the world, including China and Japan and Australia and New Zealand, everywhere. And they're all granted. And that's always been my ambition, has been to mutualize these so that I remove it from my ownership and I give it to the public as the opportunity to own their sovereign identity and have a device that helps them to do it. So no one's been able to understand all the nonsense that I talk for so many years. But now when people can see it, they'll believe it. So, I'm happy. Even though they're an infringer, I'm happy.
So
And
Nicholas,
it's never
Tyler, there's
been.
a breaking news. The 1 trillion infrastructure bill wins enough votes to pass the U.S.
Okay,
Senate.
so which amendment is attached? What's the crypto wording?
I think there's no amendment.
No
amendments.
No amendment.
So even miners are going to be brokers?
Amendments. And this is
The
what
original
happened
work.
when the Bitcoin maximalists decided to separate from the rest of the community. I had a whole discussion with them about this. They wanted to go their own way, which is how we ended up with the Warner Porter amendment, and then later on they beat back the Cruz amendment, which was just take everything out.
That wasn't the issue. In the end, there was one amendment that was supported by Treasury and all of the senators, but one senator that wanted to have $50 billion in Shelby wanted to have $50 billion. You needed unanimous consent to put forth any amendment, and so no amendment was put forth. So, with that, there was this, that, and the other before that. They all consolidated around one, but the senator didn't allow it.
Remember, Tyler, I was talking about the fine line. You've seen between Gensler, the Bear Act, the infrastructure bill, which is the pincer movement, that fine line being drawn in the sand. There's going to be peer-to-peer, and there's going to be centralized, and that's going to be it. And the question is, who falls on which side of that line?
That's essentially the assessment that I made when the EFF found this provision in the infrastructure bill. I said, wow, this is becoming a black and white, very binary, dividing of camps. There's no more gray spectrum in the middle. You're either team centralized or you're team Satoshi, essentially. I mean,
that's it. So remember when I used to say you can go the short way that ends up being the long way. That's where all of those guys are now. They started out with good intentions and they wanted to be decentralized and they wanted to do good for the people and they wanted to be able to preserve democracy, etc. But they got bought off by the billions of dollars that you get by doing a $100 billion Coinbase listing, etc. They started off in the right camp, and then they realized that actually the long way, which is the way that Verus and Value have gone, which is to do everything in the public domain, which means you don't take ICO money, you don't take VC money, and you build it with a community. That's the line that this bill has drawn.
Unless you want to be team centralized, because as soon as you take the VC money, you got to play by the rules.
But I don't even know that it's like centralization. I mean, the bigger within the blockchain community, the bigger split that I see is that there were two main communities that were separating their resources, and it was spread so thin that someone like Shelby, who wanted 50 million for defense on the Christmas tree bill, right, was able to block it. If we had had more unity in the two different camps of Bitcoin maxis versus the rest of the the rest of the blockchain community, this would have been addressed differently and I think better. And the biggest problem is that if you really talk to the people in the Bitcoin community, in the Maxi community, they don't feel any allegiance at all with anyone else in Bitcoin, in crypto. It's really just Bitcoin and that's it. And that's why we can't have that's how we ended up with all these different variations. It's literally the different groups that were lobbying that wanted different people to attach to different bills instead of combining forces and saying, what's best for one is best for all. Let's try and make everything work here. Like, we have to understand that this is going to force centralization. And you know what has a better chance now is that Counterparty Data Act now is much, and that was what Yellen wanted, and that has a much better chance of being passed now because if they've got this tax rule, then there's nothing stopping the idea that anybody can collect any, not just exchanges, but any party that has any material impact on closing transactions can actually not just collect but store and then transmit information about both parties.
I'd like to slightly just add some nuance there, but which is that the maximalists are, yes, we're not caring as much because they feel that Ethereum, rightly, is a centralized ICO based, pre-mined infrastructure, and they want the decentralized future, so that it would be natural that there would be a schism there. And I find it quite funny that the crypto community is now lobbying, just like the centralized world, those same senators. And that's really the issue, is that there is a difference between the truly decentralized, censorship resistant version of the blockchain that is currently too difficult for people to use. So it was simplified and bought essentially by Silicon Valley and A16Z in particular. So I think that, we have to be aware that, yes, we want this crypto stuff to go to unify and everything else, but it should really be the vision, which is people-powered technologies, not more of, venture capitalists pretending that they're into decentralized technologies, because when they do that, only the shareholders win. There's no one in Coinbase, no community member in Coinbase that made any of that $100 billion. It was all made by Silicon Valley investors.
Okay.
I think
I
this is
agree.
great.
That has to change. I mean, that is a hugely problematic
The
issue in
only way it
the
changes
industry.
is through decentralized technologies with DEXs, with sovereign identity, with privacy, which can turn around to the government and say, who cares what you say? Because we're censorship resistant. That means we're running a truly over the top network of humans rather than corporations who are using K Street to write our laws and imprison us.
So I'm team centralized for what it's worth, and very much favor this sort of thing, because I think, for those of us who are American, I say this as somebody who was very early on Bitcoin. I was wrong on it. It very much is an attack. And if you think about it just over time, there's a lot of interesting questions here that happen when countries give up their right to coin money, which is essentially what the crypto revolution is asking for. You end up having very weaker states, and I think that this is a real concern. I think if you look at somebody like a Vitalik, Buterin, I mean, this guy, he was denied entry into the United States to work on Ripple back in the day because of some visa issues, which is again an interesting meeting with people like Vladimir Putin. And of course, in the case of this kind of like attack on the dollar thesis, we are seeing a lot of cryptocurrencies involved in scams, involved in real dangers. And I think what you're starting to see here is you're starting to see the U.S. government crack down on these things in a very serious way. So a lot of U.S. senators, I've talked to several of them about the infrastructure bill, and a lot of them sort of made noise about being pro crypto, but they kind of knew that this was going to be passed because Treasury usually gets what Treasury wants, and I think that's sort of why we're seeing this outcome. Now, for those of you who want to build technologies that actually strengthen the power of the U.S. government and by extension the West, this bill is actually like one of the best things to ever have happened to you, because there's a lot of money in here for new technologies, particularly in genetics, particularly in space. That's going to be quite interesting how it sort of shakes out.
So I have a quick question, Nicholas. Do you think this will be, in terms of the price of Bitcoin, do you think this will have downward pressure on the price of Bitcoin?
I hate to give price views, but I would suggest that Bitcoin is the option that does have the most censorship resistance if you can self-custody. And Ethereum, I do believe, is a security, although it is masquerading currently as a similar asset to Bitcoin. And I feel that the law, as Charles says, is being written to protect from Ethereum's network, but both are accelerating at the moment. I think that the lines are just now being drawn. And I think what's going to change the paradigm is a technology that is truly self-sovereign and able for people to be their own custodians, which means that we will be able to exchange value peer-to-peer without needing middlemen who, whilst I do believe that the role of the Fed is to create orderly markets and to protect investors and the SEC, etc., we should be able to run peer-to-peer networks in the future that give us that ability to discern these things without overlords and political involvement.
Okay, so let's go through. There's just a couple of the popular headlines I want to get through, and then we're going to get into the actually far more interesting headlines, as you'll soon see. According to an internal Google Pay calculator, staff who choose to work from home will likely get a pay cut, as predicted here in Tech News Around the World, especially those who commuted over long distances. Google employees based in the same office before the pandemic could see different changes in pay if they switch to working from home permanently, and especially far remotely, where they're not coming in from time to time, as predicted, because they're now going to have to compete with people in those other markets. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this all unfolds with a global tech workforce. So the next interesting headline is the U.S. prisons. According to Reuters, U.S. prisons are exploring the use of AI to analyze inmates' phone calls, a practice privacy advocates say could amplify racial bias in the justice system. Prisons and jails are quietly deploying tech to transcribe and analyze the phone calls of incarcerated people and even, quote unquote, learn their slang, which is sometimes even intensely slang to obfuscate the true meanings of what they're trying to communicate to others outside of the prison during their phone calls. But this speech to text tech is riddled by racial bias, often making twice as many errors with black speakers, according to Avi Asher Shapiro. And technology that transcribes voice conversations is flawed and has been particularly high error rate when applied to voices of black people, according to a 2020 paper on the 5 leading systems by researchers at Stanford and Georgetown. So you have people raising red flags about this, like Albert Fox Khan, who says, why are congressional Democrats trying to fund AI experiments on people in prison? No, AI can't create a crystal ball and predict pre-crime. This bias tech is going to get people of color, individuals falsely accused of crimes and normalized racist tech. So it's got a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, I mean, this is just wrong. I mean, there's always these criticisms the technology is racist. And, they've tried to do this with Clearview in the case of Georgetown's privacy unit. There's just not a lot of evidence to support these claims. They try to use it as a vehicle for being against the technology. Understanding is that the content analysis of the prisoners' phones works pretty well. It's just a question of training data. They just don't have enough of it as yet.
Okay.
The change is time to stop.
One more interesting article here. FreshBooks becomes
super useful for shutting down, by the way, just to say something's racist or sexist rather than actually analyzing the technology. It's a very useful way to actually get people not to
think. I'm going to tweet out the article for those who want to do the deep dive on it. So give me 2 seconds. Okay, that's now tweeted to the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. And then we've got any other interesting ones? Labor lawyers say Apple has violated worker protections by shutting down 3 employee-run surveys on women and underrepresented minorities pay equity, where they're circulating a survey internally amongst Apple employees, asking them to reveal their salaries so that everyone can, be educated. It's a data collection scheme, and Apple's shutting it down first by saying you can't ask for people's gender or sex in a survey like this. And then once they remove that, then they recirculated it, and Apple said you can't send out a survey in our internal box cloud hosting platform. And so they keep having a bit of a cat and mouse there, apparently. But we'll see how that all shakes out in the end. And other interesting articles in the big popular items going around town at the moment. Facebook redesigns its data center tool to let users move images. No, that's all of the big. Well, let me do a refresh and see what if there's any hot new ones. No, it's all the same stuff. Okay, good. Robinhood just bought a company called Say Technologies, which has raised $8 million and whose service helps stock shareholders exercise their full ownership rights. And Twitter suspends Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene for 7 days over vaccine misinfo, saying it is her 4th strike and another offense could lead to permanent ban. And that's all the tweets at this moment. Okay, so now we get into the real tweets that everyone's been patiently waiting for, which are the fun ones and the exciting ones that everyone's sending in, like this one. That GTR and KKR is one of the world's biggest hedge funds, like BlackRock, and that KKR-backed Global Technology Reality has announced a new 10.5 megawatt data center in somewhere outside of Israel, or in Israel, but outside of Tel Aviv. The data center will be an underground site comprising of 4,800 square meters across 2 floors, etc. Okay, big whoop. Next one. Monica, are you still with us? I know she was here earlier, but she may have had to run. I know she goes to sleep earlier than the rest of us. She sent in this one, that digital transactions have continued to grow at a strong pace in India with increasing acceptance of tier 1 and 2 towns. Digital transactions have grown by 80% since November 30th till now. Grown 80%, nearly doubled. That's fantastic in India, as against the previous 250-day period. And so it's growing outside of the tier 1 towns into the tier 2 and tier 3 towns. And then we covered the Google keys. And then check this one out. Chris Fornoff, are you still with us? No, he had to jump as well. That's a shame, because this is very relevant to our project, which is a drone spraying fertilizer over what appears to be a rice field. And thank you to Gabby for this one. I just tweeted it out. You can see it. This huge drone spraying fertilizer on a rice field. Why is that interesting? Well, because this drone could be spraying bamboo seeds. And then we don't need to hire a helicopter or plane to spread bamboo seeds across the bamboo belt, as we plan to do, to draw down CO2 from the atmosphere, which is our little fun side project. So if you're interested in mass bamboo farming to draw down CO2, as is many climate scientists and I guess botanists believe that that's one of the best ways to draw down CO2, to plant rapidly growing grasses like bamboo. And we're currently on the lookout for seed cultivation and distribution. And this drone looks like a brilliant use case. It would be much cheaper to buy these drones or rent these drones than to deal with helicopters and airplanes. Anyway, really cool technology. You have to see this. I just tweeted it out. Thank you, Gabby, for that. And it's in China, no less, which is where the bamboo seeds are anyway. So maybe we'll pick one up while we're there. So the next headline is Disney World finally releases prices for its new Galactic Star Cruiser Starwood Hotel, and it's out of this world expensive. $4,809 for 2 nights, accommodations for 2 guests, and it's at Walt Disney World, and it's kind of this popular headline that people are.
Ouch. You could go into space for cheaper
Almost.
than that.
Almost. And next headline at the moment is Wix launches a no-code app builder for $200 a month. So now you can build apps without knowing any code at all. This morning, Wix announced a new product for business owners called Branded App by Wix, which allows users to develop native apps without writing code. I just tweeted it out. That's not cheap, $200 a month. But if you're allowed to, if it helps you to build apps without knowing code, well, it might be worth it. And let's see what we got next year. Venmo to allow credit card holders to automatically buy cryptocurrency with their cash back, according to Venmo. Venmo to allow credit card holders to automatically buy cryptocurrency. PayPal-owned Venmo is expanding its support for cryptocurrency with today's launch of a new feature that will allow users to automatically buy crypto. Then we've got Salesforce Plus. We covered that. Thank you, Evan. And then we got at least $611 million stolen in a massive cross-chain hack, as MA informed us earlier. Climate protesters target the Prime Minister's residence in Australia. As I told you, this is what's going to start happening. And the bad actors are going to start being attacked. And whoever the eco warriors or eco activists feel are the bad actors, and in this case, they feel that it's the Australian Prime Minister who's a bad actor, so they're attacking his personal residence and trying to burn it to the ground, no doubt. So that's going to continue to escalate as climate change continues to cause more anxiety, and people are going to relieve that anxiety and existential, feelings of threat by attacking who they feel are the bad actors. This is incredibly simplistic anthropological tribal behavior that is deeply, deeply ingrained in people since time began. So this is barely a prediction. Yeah.
How soon before a climate change related assassination takes place?
I think before a human assassination is you're going to see a factory explosion of a coal plant or the likes. So or the first.
So like a return of the Environmental Liberation Front or some of those sort of like more crazy groups from the 90s.
Although far better funded, because you're going to start seeing people feel like it's a good use of their money to financially endorse that kind of behavior. If it feels like that's what it's going to take to get the changes that are required. If they feel like the governments aren't making the changes at the required rate, and they're going to proverbially, metaphorically, drive the Titanic into the iceberg, then they're going to start paying people who are going to go hijack the captain of the Titanic. So,
but do you really think that people would like blow up a coal plant if it affects their power or something? Like,
fair enough. They probably won't attack the one in their backyard. Yeah.
I think you'll start to see a lot more hacking of coal companies, oil companies generally, by activist groups around the world. That'll be my prediction.
I've even said that. I said after the first oil pipeline hack that we'll see more oil pipeline hacks, because I believe there might even be an echo element to their choice of targets. Why are they consistently seeing meat packing plants and oil pipelines and things like that? So the next headline is Instagram is now testing ads in the shop tab as the social e-commerce phenomena picks up steam. Mexican drug cartel threatens to kill a TV reporter for what they are claiming is unfair coverage. Men claim to represent Mexico's...
Well, that's one solution. That's one solution.
Men claiming to represent Mexico's most powerful drug cartel accuse the anchor of unfair coverage. And, we want to be covered fairly, or we will kill you. So, The next one is truly interesting. It's a digital beehive with cameras inside. The outer hive itself is fully digital. They can move. It's fully automated. It's robotic. It's got cameras. It's got AI. It's got everything. And it's called BeeWise. BEEWISE, to provide around-the-clock care to minimize the risk of colonies collapsing due to intensive agriculture and the use of pesticides and climate change, etc. And you just got to see this little video to believe it from Reuters about BeWise. China sticks with zero COVID approach, where they're trying to get it down to zero, leaving borders closed for now, according to South China Morning Post. Former health minister advocates continuing the elimination goal, including against the Delta variant. Mattel is being criticized for Barbie collection that commemorates the Olympic Games, leaves out Asian Barbie. They've got Caucasian Barbie, Black Barbie, Latino Barbie, brunette and blonde Barbie, but notably no Asian Barbie. And so now they're getting the headline reads, Tokyo Olympics, Mattel commemorates games with Barbie collection that leads to criticisms. U.S. toy maker Mattel launched a line of dolls to commemorate the Tokyo Olympics, but failed to make one that represented Asian female athletes, and so they're getting criticism. Pianist is fitted with a robotic 11th finger so that they can play even more complicated piano pieces. And you can see this robotic extra finger in the tweet I just twatted on Twitter. Pianist fitted with a robotic thumb can learn to play with 11 digits. A robotic thumb strapped next to the little finger can be controlled well enough by some people to be used while playing piano. Fantastic. Now we can all play more Liszt pieces and, those really advanced piano pieces. So Earth will hit 1.5 C climate, which is the real tipping point limit, according to climate scientists, and they expect that we will hit it within 20 years, according to the IPCC report that came out yesterday that everyone's talking about. And so we got to act fast. We don't have enough time. And there's a movie called After Yang that's getting a lot of attention, and there's a review that says it's a delightful movie about robots teaching humans. After Yang is a thoughtful film about a couple who purchases an android friend for their young daughter. It evokes a future where humans learn moral lessons from their robot assistants. And so tweeting that out in case that sounds like your cup of tea. And MIT has an article about the widening gap between data leaders and data laggards. From external data to customer experience analytics, this is what leaders are focusing on. And as I've made the case multiple times here before, and I will again, if you think that the wealth gap and the wealth disparity is big now, wait until you realize that the key weapon in the haves and the have-nots is who has AIs and is able to use AIs and the data around what AIs are able to do. And this is what gives the big data companies like Google, Facebook, and others, and you can include Snapchat and even Spotify, people who can know how to collect and use data, especially with AIs, essentially have a nuclear bomb in a butter knife fight compared to the insurance industry or the education industry or the medical industry or the lawyer industry who do not know how to use data or AIs. And it will be a completely unfair annihilation of those industries by the big tech companies and the wealth that will go to them. They will just completely overtake those industries and all the money associated with those industries. Those are very, multi-billion dollar, some of them are trillion-dollar industries. Yes.
Hey, Tyler, define unfair, though. I mean, it's a tool, right? So it's a tool that they're utilizing. I mean, I think it's going to make a huge shift, but it's a really powerful
I'll say disproportionate. Tool not an unfair fight. It'll be a disproportionate. What's the word that we could replace unfair with?
No, that's all good. And I want to go back to the Barbies. I didn't hear Bitcoin Barbie.
Bitcoin miner Barbie.
Tyler.
That's funny. Yes.
Hey, Tyler.
Amanda. Yes, Messi.
Tyler. Hey. It's not tech news, but breaking news. Governor Cuomo resigned.
You go. Biden had asked him to.
Yeah, it's on CNN. Yeah. I just got home from work and it's
interesting question.
He is on TV. There you go.
The reported groping that has led to his resignation now I guess that happened pre-Me Too movement, which I think begs the question: why wasn't it kind of brought up during the Me Too movement? Why now? Would be my question.
Well, sometimes from what I heard and I have been reading for a while is that he really had a lot of enemies, but then they were really putting up with it because somebody said actually from his, his office and workers and others, including men, because he was really effective in getting under control the coronavirus in New York and other things. So they said, oh, we would put up with other things, not just the groping, but even other. They said he's really mean and stuff, even way before that when he was working in Clinton administration. But now things start falling apart, especially with the, nursing home and the numbers and fudging and all those things on the. They said when someone started coming and then saying he's been doing this, and everybody starts piling. I think
Okay.
that's what's happening.
All right. So,
No, I mean the real story is the Ronan Farrow thing is the thing that finally took him out, which is putting the pressure on the federal prosecutors during the during the Obama years. He's just he's got a lot of mob ties. We sort of talked about this when it was first announced, and when he was involved with the government, he rewarded a lot of mobbish figures, and they're using the Me Too thing as basically the vehicle for taking him out.
So the next big headline here is from Poppy. New artificial intelligence tool helps forecast Amazon deforestation. Nearly 10,000 square kilometers of the Brazilian Amazon, an area the size of Lebanon, is at high risk of being cleared, according to a new tool using artificial intelligence. Just tweeted that out. And Messi found a tweet from TechCrunch that I'm now retweeting at TNATW about Turkey's first decacorn, a 10 billion valuation. In fact, it's a 16.5 billion valuation called Trendyol, spelled Trendy, OL. An e-commerce platform based in Turkey has raised 1.5 billion in a massive fundraising round that values the company at 16.5 billion. It's e-commerce in Turkey, and the complete list of decacorn companies is now being retweeted to the Tech News Twitter account. A decacorn company refers to a privately owned company with a valuation of more than 10 billion. Out of 672 unicorns, less than 5% have a valuation of over 10 billion. And the complete list of decacorns across several industries has now been tweeted to the Tech News Twitter account, so you can check that out. Senators press Facebook for answers about why it cut off misinformation researchers at NYU. The ongoing drama of the Ad Observatory Lab, who's trying to deconstruct the algorithms around Facebook ads, specifically political ads. And there was a PhD candidate at NYU studying this with people who opted in by installing a web browser extension, and Facebook shut off all the data, claiming that I believe it was the FTC. They were claiming that the FTC, didn't allow them to do that, or their hands are tied. We'd love to help you out, but unfortunately, the FTC says we can't. Then the FTC came out and said, "Nope, not at all. Don't use our name in that way. We never said you couldn't do that. So they can do that. Matter of fact, why did you stop it?" And now senators are now pressing Facebook for answers about why they cut it off, because the FTC. You said the FTC, and the FTC said no. So why did you cut it off, Mark? Why aren't you letting NYU study how your political ads work by users who are willingly giving up the data to NYU? These users are willingly giving up their own data about their own viewing of ads on Facebook from their own profiles to NYU. What's the problem, Mark? Why aren't you letting NYU do this? That's what they want to know. That's what we're going to find out in the continuing saga of Facebook versus NYU.
Tyler, I heard something about this yesterday. One of the people doing the study, and it gets a lot deeper than that as to corporations and they're giving up advertiser data, but their view is, we've always treated corporations as people, and do they really have the right to claim that their data is protected? And it also went down. They were trying to see if things skewed Republican or Democrat in the misinformation, and before they were cut off, they said that it actually wasn't skewing in either of those directions. It skews highly in misinformation. So misinformation travels, or disinformation travels, is highly amplified over information, regardless of what direction it's going, which source.
So next up from Reuters, activist Greta Thunberg, in Swedish is pronounced Thunberg, as Swedes know, and the rest of the world calls her Greta Thunberg, but in Swedish we call it Thunberg. And so Greta now plans to attend the UN climate conference in Scotland, known as COP26. It's kind of the big annual, which is not that hard for her to get to from Stockholm, where she lives. So it's glad that she can make it again this year and give everyone a good verbal lashing. The next one up from Messi about a company called Move, spelled with two O's, Moove, raises $23 million to create flexible options for drivers to own cars in Africa. Africa is home to more than 1 billion people, where a majority have limited or no access to vehicle financing. And here it comes. It's called Move with two O's and a cool logo. Very cool logo. And looks like, yeah.
I was going to mention, I looked at this company that passed Invest. A lot of that money is actually debt, but it is a real problem. We also have a competitive company that we backed, so I'm not into backing competitors to each other in the same portfolio. But that being said and disclosed, the team does look very smart, and a lot of the money is debt because they're obviously providing debt capital for the drivers to basically end up owning their own cars. It's kind of rent to own model, because in many emerging markets, it's very Uber originally was meant to be this side gig for gig economy workers to have their own cars and work their own hours. But in Africa, a lot of Uber drivers don't even own their own car, actually work for the man, for a boss, right? And one really ridiculously hilarious but dangerous story I have is that in Nairobi, I once had an Uber driver who was half asleep drive me into the cargo area of the airport at 5 a.m. because he was working so many hours by his boss. He wasn't working his own hours. Just kind of, I'm sure other emerging markets is the same. I think that LATAM has similar issues, maybe Southeast Asia. But yeah, this is kind of helping gig economy workers in Africa basically have more control, have their own cars versus not being able to afford a car and being able to. And also, if they can't afford a car, they often can't meet the standards. Because, Uber and these rideshare companies have standards for what car you can use, right? Those standards will probably rise over time. Maybe they'll say you can only use EVs or badly emitting. If you have a car that's just emitting too much emissions, they might say no. So this is really tough. This is helping drivers for sure.
So here we go. Next up, from Evan, stunning new report ranks U.S. dead last in healthcare among richest countries despite spending the most. Ouch. Insult to injury. Any comment on this one, Evan? It says, if healthcare were an Olympic sport, the U.S. might not qualify in the competition with other high-income nations.
No, I mean, we spend the most per capita in the world, and we have the worst outcomes. I don't know what else you can say. It's a debacle of a system we have.
Perhaps because the people...
That's kind of a blanket statement for worst outcomes, Evan, but it is... I agree on the debacle in a lot of areas part, but yeah. Might argue on worst outcomes.
The next headline is also from Evan about, to boost self-sufficiency, Singapore has developed advanced system for treating sewage involving a network of tunnels and high-tech plants, and not like biological plants, but like technological plants, like sewage plants. Recycled wastewater treatment plants can now meet 40% of Singapore's water demand. Resource-starved Singapore turns to sewage into high or ultra clean water. Giant pumps were deep underground at a plant in Singapore that helps transform sewage into water so clean it's fit for human consumption. Next one.
Yeah, but they still pour it back to the water reservoir so that we will treat it again before it runs to the tap.
And next one, also from Evan, that AI could soon diagnose dementia with a single brain scan by comparing the brain scans of patients with scans of existing dementia patients along with any relevant medical records. And indeed, AI is better at making those kinds of analysis, even better than the best doctors. So Interesting article you can read. We just tweeted that out. And then Evan's also got this one, that robots are coming for the lawyers, which may be bad for tomorrow's attorneys. Lawyers were thought to be mostly immune from coming AI revolution, but two legal experts explain why jobs that rely on human ingenuity can still be disrupted by AIs. And in fact, we had somebody join us right here 24 hours ago, kind of naming Amazon as a leading figure in lawyering artificial intelligences that have more than a few lawyers talking. Yeah?
Have more. As someone who hates lawyers, I welcome our AI robot lawyer overlords.
I'm a lawyer and I hate lawyers and I don't think this is I don't think we're far from it, honestly. I mean, so much of law is commoditized at this point. I don't think that there's going to be I don't think it's that far away. I think that's not really the value of decision makers anyway. I think that people have mistaken raw knowledge, the information, the facts about something for the value of what decision makers provide. It's not really understanding what the law says. It's figuring out how to apply it to a particular person in a particular situation. So it's the same thing with medicine. You could say that AI is going to take that over, and it might, but it's decision making, not the AI part, the getting the raw knowledge. That's not the part that's the valuable part. The part that you still need professionals for is the decision making process that will be very difficult because it changes. It's so ad hoc.
Okay, so on this point of AI,
it sounds like you could have a team
go
of.
ahead, Evan.
Sorry. Now it sounds like you could have one lawyer being a team of AIs, sort of helping her with daily stuff. That would be a more logical relationship.
For sure. I mean, I think that we're going to start seeing, and we do see already oversupply in the law market. It has been, the market, unfortunately, because of 3 years of school that teach you nothing. But so supply and demand contract in a lag, right? They grow and contract in a lag. So more people will apply, but the market is usually already adjusted by the time they get to the market, and then fewer people apply, but then there's a dearth because it takes a while to get to the actual marketplace. But we're already seeing that there's too much supply in law, and it can't accommodate many more people. So I would not be surprised if they did this. The biggest issue is going to be something like jurisdictional interconnectivity, right? So the ability to actually have a bunch of different AI people who can instantly, or AI people, but like AI machines that can instantly assess where the risks are of various jurisdictions regarding various options, and then have somebody say, okay, this is the best route to do whatever it is, because it usually involves more than one jurisdiction. That, I think, is going to be the best thing. But then having actually language interaction is going to be the really tough too. You're going to have AI that is programmed in a bunch of different languages, but also speaks to AI that has a completely different language base.
On the subject of AI, OpenAI, one of the best kind of outfits, which has a lot of backing from Microsoft and Elon Musk and others, is doing a live stream event starting in 30 minutes. So we will conclude the headlines in 30 minutes and then listen to whatever OpenAI is going to do, this big announcement. And so you can just sit here and we'll listen to that together. And really curious to see what they're going to reveal. The website, if you want to watch it, the video part of it, I will tweet that out now. It's at twitch.tv/OpenAI. And if you have a hard time, you just want to click it, I now just tweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. And so we got 30 minutes left of headlines, and then we'll watch OpenAI's big announcement. And so the next headline is world's strongest glass that's as hard as diamond discovered. Material could find applications in solar cells due to its outstanding mechanical and electronic properties. And material, say scientists. Okay, great. That sounds lovely. And then tiny maniac robots could deliver drugs directly to the central nervous system. That would be nice too. And those both from Evan, and then this one from Dr. Fran. It's about the OpenAI event that's coming up very shortly. Thank you for that, Dr. Fran. And then Evan back with another one that the French Navy recently developed an anti-drone system that can track and shoot down drones with frickin' laser beams, called a high energy laser. And it's this air defense system can track and shoot down drones with lasers remotely. So somebody sitting in an office with a kind of a headset and a trigger can use a laptop to shoot down drones. It can be operated by a single user. And it can, you can watch this video all about it. So kind of wild new drone defeating technology. And this one from Katerina says that Caltech's space-based solar power project could provide Earth with limitless energy. The project is aiming to set up solar panels in space and beam the energy to Earth with frickin' laser beams. Fantastic. So next up is Poppy with one from the New York Times. The New York Times learned a fun new word in an article about meme trends. An article about the latest trend in low-effort absurdist posts pushes the paper of record to publish a new term. And what is that new term? Well, let's see if we can find it in this article about shit posting. The old gray lady, the New York Times, has succumbed to the tides of history and today, at long last, published the term shit posting for the first time. Naturally enough, the word appeared in an article on Gen Z's latest innovations in the forum, which currently sees the young and hip filling Instagram with posts that resemble Tumblr memes from a decade ago. Taylor Lorenz, New York Times article that we talked about earlier about how text memes are taking over Instagram, describes the new school of posting, summarizing it as a barraging people's feeds with seemingly indiscriminate content, often accompanied by humorous and confessional commentary. The key passage in the piece comes just before this, known in internet slang as shit posting. This style of posting involves people publishing low quality images, videos, or comments online. So Taylor Lorenz gets credit for using the word shit posting in the New York Times. There you go. And next one is robots are coming for the lawyers. We just covered that. The company, Twitter just led the first ever bug bounty for AI bias. We covered that. Mukesh Ambani teams up with his counterpart in America, known as Bill Gates, for a hot new business of a new battery company that they're both investing in. Substack signs a whole slate of big name comic creators like, Garfield and those kinds of things. The Peanuts. So now we've got comics on Substack. So they're kind of diversifying. That's great. Google launches a program to hire more people with autism. Google's teaming up with Stanford University in an effort to make its workforce more neurodiverse. And artificial intelligence may diagnose dementia. We covered that. And that one's from BBC. The system being tested could spot disease long before symptoms or obvious brain signs develop. The impact of this research may have on human capital is huge. And then here's the one that Cheryl found from Nikkei that says Japanese public organizations, academia, and private companies are set to launch a joint research project on the mining and development of lunar resources, including the exploration for water on the moon. Good times. And Cheryl also found this one from Reuters about the pay cut. Google employees who will work from home could lose big money, especially if they're working far remotely in parts of the world where other people are willing to work for a tenth of their salary. Yes, only makes sense. Next one, in the long term, Nikkei Asia is reporting that in the long term, South and Southeast Asia monsoon and East Asian summer monsoons precipitation will increase. Yes, exactly. And in fact, they've already have started. And that's why I moved here, because I want to move to a place that's getting more rain, not less. Like Afghanistan, where people are moving because the Taliban are back and because of the droughts. That's the new reports from Afghanistan, is that there's now an exodus of somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 million people fleeing Afghanistan because of a combination of the Taliban and droughts, which makes sense because Iran itself is having mass protests next door to Afghanistan because of droughts. So droughts is already causing tens of millions of people to have climate migration and climate refugees due to droughts. Droughts. Not sea level rising. That's to come decades from now. What's happening today in 2021 is tens of millions of people relocating due to water shortages, aka droughts. Today, now, tens of millions leaving now as we speak. There's video crew teams moving with the Afghan refugees, leaving Afghanistan as we speak right fucking now. And they're going through Iran into Turkey, who ironically are also having droughts. The whole region for the next 100 years is going to run out of water. It's starting now. They're already moving now in 2021. They will continue to move and accelerate in numbers. The number of drought refugees is just starting. It's already tens of millions starting now, today, now. The climate refugees due to sea level rising are not really started yet and won't start for at least a decade. So please pay attention to what the real critical crisis is. It's tens of millions of climate refugees due to droughts and water shortages. It's called water stress. Look into it because you will be impacted, especially if you're in Europe. Even though Europe just passed a ban on the hijab, there's going to be, in the very near term, in the very near future, 50 million Muslims from the Middle East forced migration due to no water, which makes their current domiciles uninhabitable. So start thinking about it now, because that's what you're going to face in the very near future. Yes, you will face sea level rising. Yeah, absolutely. In about 20 years. What you're going to face right now, what Turkey, both Pakistan and Turkey are both trying to scramble as we speak to build fortified borders to stop tens of millions of Afghanis from going into Pakistan and into Turkey. You were going to say, Gabby? Okay, sure.
I think it's me. I say water is a blessing. Cherish it.
So, yes, indeed, Nikkei Japan's reporting that South and Southeast Asia and East Asian summer monsoon precipitation will increase because that water's got to go somewhere. And guess where it's going? Right where I am. You think that's a coincidence? No, not at all, because I researched the shit out of that before I figured out where I wanted to go. And I want to go where the water's going. Go where the water's going and protect the shit out of it. That's the name of the game. Welcome. You feel fun. Welcome to the real game that you're all going to be playing eventually, that I've been playing for 6 years now and spent a decade researching. So have fun. The pool's fine. The waiter will be by soon to take your drink orders. So the next big headline is Big Oil wants to keep drilling in the North Sea. The backlash is growing. Yes, indeed it is. You're going to start seeing protesters, as is you are here from CNN.com. I just tweeted it out. Big Oil wants to keep drilling in the North Sea. And now there's a backlash. And there's a whole bunch of very privileged white folks holding signs saying no new oil. Stop the oil drilling. Stop Cambo is the place where they want to do this. The UK government has been warned to stop a massive North Sea oil project or see its hopes of becoming climate leader dashed as the country prepares for huge backlashes. Yep. People are going to start protesting. It's going to start getting violent. There's now going to start realizing it's worth their time and energy and money and even their freedom to sacrifice themselves for the cause of stopping global warming and climate crisis and et cetera, you're going to see it's going to get wild. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I'll be enjoying it all from my private island. So in the next headline from David Crace, in a first, AI to replace judges for resolving real estate disputes in Dubai. Tweeting that out now from Mashable. The initiative uses an integrated platform, Go fast track procedures for citizens. So Dubai is already getting into the AI judges, as China already does. China has 3 different AI courts for traffic violations, and now Mashable's reporting that there's AIs to replace judges for resolving real estate disputes in Dubai. And top public relations director at Chinese social media giant Weibo, which is the Twitter of China, has been arrested. Why is he arrested, Cheryl? Okay.
Hold on.
You read it? I got it right here. So it says from Channel News Asia that Chinese authorities have arrested
corruption.
Chinese social media giant Weibo. According to an internal memo, staff seen by Reuters. The director of public relations at Weibo, which is partly owned by e-commerce giant Alibaba, is suspected of bribery and had, quote unquote, seriously harmed the interests of the company. In accordance with company policy and the law, we have decided to fire Mao as a punishment and will not rehire him. The firing comes, Mao join my Weibo not respond, Weibo had come under fire. There you go. Thank you, Cheryl. We got tweeting that one out. And then next we got plant-based fish is rattling the multi-billion-dollar seafood industry, according to MSN. And thank you to Evan for that one. Now we got plant-based fish. Soon we'll have lab-grown fish. And now here's an interesting one that Cheryl found about our friend Masayoshi-san, Son-san, as they call him in Japan, one of Japan's wealthiest individuals and tech visionary behind the SoftBank Vision Fund. And Nikkei Asia's headline says, in Chinese, he's one of the biggest investors in China tech as well, or he was until everything started falling apart. He was a big investor in Didi and Alibaba and the edtech companies, and those have all fallen apart. And probably no one's lost more than Masa in China recently, or on the planet, perhaps. I bet he's lost more than anybody collectively due to all kind of the tech crackdowns in China lately. So he's now being quoted that in Chinese investment activities, quote unquote, various new regulations have begun. So I want to wait and see what kind of regulations are implemented and what kind of impact they will have on the stock market, said SoftBank Group Chairman and CEO Masayoshi Son. There you go. Yeah.
Tyler, sorry to interrupt you. I think the MedTech room
Okay.
is still locked. Okay. Is there any way they can do it, like unlock it? Oh, never mind. Carl Patel is inside.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I saw Carl Patel.
So the next one is, because we've got 20 minutes until the AI, OpenAI live stream starts. So Evan has this one about how a deepfake Tom Cruise video, a viral deepfake of Tom Cruise on TikTok, turned into a very real AI company. Earlier this year, videos of Tom Cruise started popping up on TikTok of the actor doing some surprisingly un-Tom Cruise-like stuff, like golfing and goofing around and whatnot. And it turns out that it wasn't Tom Cruise at all. But the founder of what is now a startup of sorts, is an app for Windows only, that will allow people to do live streaming with deepfakes. So you can pick a celebrity and pose it over your own face and do a live stream as that celebrity. Fantastic.
Killer app.
So I'm just tweeting that article out now. Thank you to Evan for that one. TikTok named as the most downloaded app of 2020, according to App Genie. The Chinese app popularity comes even after former President Donald Trump tried to ban it in the U.S., but couldn't quite find the buyer. And then New York City's new biometrics privacy law takes effect today. The law will give New Yorkers greater protections over how their biometric data is collected, according to TechCrunch. And it's about facial biometrics, if I remember correctly. The new biometrics privacy ordinance has taken effect across New York City, putting new limits on what businesses can do with the biometric data they collect on their customers. From Friday, so not today, a few days ago, businesses that collect biometric information, most commonly in the form of facial recognition and fingerprints, are required to conspicuously post notices and signs to customers at their doors explaining how their data will be collected. The ordinance applies to a wide range of businesses, retailers, stores, restaurants, and theaters, to name a few, which are also barred from selling, sharing, or otherwise profiting from the biometric information they collect. The move will give New Yorkers and its millions of visitors each year greater protections over how their biometric data is collected and used, while also serving to dissuade businesses from using technology that critics say is discriminatory and often doesn't work. Businesses can face stiff penalties for violating the law, but can escape fines if they fix the violation quickly. The law is by no means perfect, etc., etc., etc. So I'm tweeting this one out for your convenience at the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW, and thank you to the person who tweeted that in. And then BB, who joins us each day in the audience, found this article from CNBC claiming that Moderna may be superior to Pfizer against Delta variant, and that the mRNA vaccine from Pfizer and BioNTech may be less effective than Moderna's against the Delta variant of coronavirus, according to two reports posted on medRxiv. IV effectiveness against Delta. Moderna ranked at 72%, with Pfizer at 42%. And then I found a video on YouTube with that is quite interesting because, before I read the title of it, we read a headline earlier today when we met here, 12 hours or so ago? 10 hours ago, about how India is now joining Germany and Japan and the UK and the EU and the US and others in the South China Sea near Taiwan, raising the obvious question: what are all of these countries all doing with their navies around Taiwan at the same time? And perhaps, leading some people to suspect that there might be a joint recognition of Taiwan, which obviously will cause earthquakes in the region. And then I found this YouTube video that China has released itself on its own Chinese publication, that there's now China and Russia are doing a joint military drill simultaneously in the northeast of China, not so far from Taiwan itself. So interesting that you've got China and Russia doing joint military drills simultaneous to the U.S., Germany, Japan, India, Vietnam, Philippines, and a few others I'm forgetting, the UK, doing joint military drills around Taiwan simultaneously. Kind of interesting this is all happening simultaneously. So I'm tweeting out the video. Germany as well.
Germany
Yeah.
too?
So I'm just now.
CPU sovereignty. CPU sovereignty.
We will find out. So we got Cheryl's headline there. We've got the China-Russia one. $1 trillion infrastructure bill wins enough votes to pass the U.S. Senate without amendments, meaning a whole lot of crypto companies going to be moving out of the U.S. to perhaps Moldova, where there's no extradition treaty if they're accused of doing anything wrong. So, other headlines anyone wants to share at this moment? Here's one from Evan. From the Wall Street Journal, how computers with human-like senses will change our lives. With the help of AIs and special sensors, next-generation robots will be able to perform tasks ranging from understanding speech in a noisy environment to sniffing out phony wine. Indeed, they'll have superhuman abilities of all kinds, including smell and sight and hearing. You imagine it has Shazam to every sense you can imagine. They will be superhuman in every conceivable way, including physically. They are already doing backflips. How many people can do backflips? They're already beating, expert ping pong players at ping pong. They're already beating the world's best chess players. It's going to be hard to find a category that they won't be superior to humans in the very near future. And so you can combine all of those into one C-3PO, and they'll be superhuman in every possible way, with superhuman capabilities, facial recognition of every person on the planet, audio recognition of every sound on the planet, every song, every voice, be able to detect diseases through audio, of depression. It's just going to be truly unimaginable. So you can read all about that from the Wall Street Journal. Again, the headline is How Computers with Human-Like Senses Will Change Your Lives. So thank you for that one, Evan. And then Katerina just shared this one about no more plastic water bottles, ? North Carolina startup tech delivers pure H2O called Boomerang Water. Spent 7 years developing a closed-loop sustainable bottled water manufacturing system. And you kind of have to see this system that they've developed to kind of understand it. But I just tweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account, where it shows the people holding a special kind of water bottle. And it says, in 2017, The Guardian conducted a study that found that globally humans buy 1 million disposable plastic water bottles every minute. And that consumption was increasing, but are those bottles really disposable? The short answer is no. 91% of plastic isn't recycled, National Geographic found. The waste is extraordinary, and the waste is changing ecosystems and is considered by many scientists to have potentially negative health outcomes for humans, as well as plastic breaks up into microplastics, which are a big problem in our oceans and finding its way into all of our food, including fruits and fish and everything else. Wrote the Coastal Review earlier this week following a virtual conference of researchers earlier this month. This isn't a new problem. Plastic water bottles have been around for quite some time, and the consumption of water is increasing globally. A Davidson-based company called Boomerang Water believes there's a different path forward where consumers can enjoy purified fresh water without the waste and without the carbon emissions caused by manufacturing and transporting of plastic water bottles. Now the company, which began in the garage of the co-founders, is in a growth mode after raising $1.38 million earlier this year to scale its capabilities. Boomerang Water is revolutionizing the massive bottled water industry by manufacturing, installing, and maintaining manufacturing technology that can produce fresh, ultra-pure, filtered water on site in any controlled environment. And for companies around industries and diverse high-luxury hotels, again, you got to kind of see how this works. And there's a video as well, but it says Boomerang Water systems can be deployed on site in any controlled environment. And they want to massively reduce the carbon footprint and reduce plastic waste. But again, you got to see the video to truly understand what I'm referring to. So the next headline is also from Katerina about researchers reveal anti-cancer property of nanomaterials. A research group led by Professor Li Hongcheng from Shenzhen Institute of Advanced Technology is revealing an anti-cancer property of nanomaterials. And you can read all about that if that's your kind of thing. Google's developing a new super intelligent AI is the headline. Then Jeff Dean, who leads the ethical AI group there, Jeff Dean's appearance at TED comes during a time when critics are calling for greater scrutiny over big tech's control over the world's AI. And I guess, is TED happening right now? And did he just do that talk just now? Because that might be a really good talk to turn into. The next headline from Dr. Danish via CNN is SoftBank's CEO, Masayoshi Son, went big on China. Now he's pulling back, as we just read his quote from Cheryl in Nikkei Asia. SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son's cutting back on new investments in China as the country's private sector continues to face historic crackdowns. And that's big money. Masa's probably spending somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 50 to 100 billion in China investments each year. So it's very substantial. Then Evan just found this one about how the explosive growth in satellites could impact life on Earth. Satellites are set to grow by 1,000% in the next decade. They might help U.S. predict pandemics and save the planet. Was there other interesting findings in that article, Evan?
Just great use cases for satellites from agriculture, monitoring climate change, oceans, currents. I mean, really, not things you would imagine possible, but are with, particularly with CubeSats, these micro satellites that can be sent into space really cheaply.
So here's a bunch more. The headline is from Anna Marie that doctors may be able to send patients a Zoom link in the future because now Zoom can work in your browser without the app. Fantastic. So somebody can just send you a little link in a chat message, like a doctor that you're having a teleconference call with, or, maybe you're texting with a doctor, or you're texting with a doctor AI bot who's then able to tell you, hey, we need...
That'll work. It's WebRTC, Tyler, so that'll work with iOS 15 too. You'll be able to share a link, and on iPhone you'll be able to have someone open a browser link, or an Android phone can open a link from an iPhone.
Yeah,
so
but also they could also then charge you through that without Apple getting its 30% cut because you're circumventing the app. Yeah, it's truly fantastic. Correct. It's a win-win for everybody. So that's truly great. Zoom working in a browser now. And then related to SoftBank and Masayoshi Son, another detail is that SoftBank has offloaded shares of U.S. tech giants like Facebook, Microsoft, Alphabet, and Netflix. So they're selling off on big tech, according to its latest financial report. It says they offloaded billions of dollars of stock in U.S. tech giants in the 3 months between March and June. And then, Evan, you just found this crazy one about the psychotic stare. An algorithm may be able to detect signs of psychopathy based on an inmate's head movements, and not just inmates, anybody. And like I was just telling you, that robots will soon be able to have superhuman powers. We continue to add new algorithms to these AIs, and they can all merge together eventually. So just like
sort of like the prison telephone telemonitoring AI that we talked about earlier. So every aspect of them is going to be measured, or can be measured at least.
Okay.
Michelle
Well, this article says that psychopathic inmates tend to exhibit reduced head movement during forensic interviews, according to new research that utilized machine learning. That's wild. I didn't know that. And AIs can detect things that humans can't, like this, the lack of head movement by somebody during an interview, which is an indicator of being a psychopath, which could be helpful to know. That could also be very helpful to know of people here in Clubhouse. I would love to know which people in the audience are psychopaths before I invite them up on stage.
Yeah.
So
Mark Zuckerberg didn't move his head
Senate
at all
hearings?
during the congressional hearings.
Interesting.
So
Well, hold on. Where's my X-Files music for that one? if ever there was a need for the X-Files theme, that might be it. So, yeah, maybe we could apply the AI to the Senate hearings to find out. Maybe we could apply it to political candidates as they're running for offices. That's an interesting use case. That would be fun to see. Fantastic article, that one. And the next one is everyone loves to send this one in today, that Google employees based in working remote might need to take pay cuts. Yep, as I predicted. And the U.S. infrastructure bill passed, and wave power changes ahead with static electricity generators and ocean-powered buoys brings technology closer to the dream of obtaining energy from the sea. My goodness, let's hope this all works out, because there's an endless abundance of wave energy that could be captured if we could just figure out how to do that in a way that's sustainable, meaning long term. So the next one is from Dr. Fran via Forbes. That about virtual space, an idea whose time has come, and a trend sure to accelerate. VR and AR are coming together to deliver new views of a more immersive world for businesses. And that's from Cognizant, which is a huge business consulting group, similar to Capgemini and BCG and whatnot. What else do we got? German tech hub seeks to woo TSMC to build the Taipei semiconductor giant. Japan just managed to get TSMC to build the facility in Japan. Now Germany wants in on that fun too, because everyone wants to have their own chips made, in their own geography, sovereign chips. And TSMC is the kind of leading name in that space, so it makes sense. They're all courting, giving TSMC anything they want, anything. Dear sweet Jesus, could you please make your chips, in our backyard?
Including the
vaccine. And then TSMC, of course, says, well, funny you should ask. Would you be interested in sending your Navy to Taiwan, say, in early August? Oh, is that why all the Navy ships are all the world's navies are all around Taiwan at the moment? Oh, and by the way, when you're there, would you mind telling China that you now formally recognize Taiwan? And then we can talk about your chips. Sound good? Thanks. Call me back next month when you got your Navy there. Look forward to that phone call. So, and by the way, if you have a few extra vaccines, you could drop those off while you're all on the way. Thanks. Yeah. Look forward to your email. Ta-ta. So
it's basically they're the new Saudi oil fields, is the way
chips are the new oil.
70s and 80s.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. NVIDIA opens its metaverse for engineers. Mengdi, any comment on this? The headlines from VentureBeat that NVIDIA opens its metaverse for engineers by adding millions NVIDIA hopes to expand what they call the Omniverse with the addition of millions of Blender users who use a simple tool to create 3D imagery. I just tweeted it out to the Tech News Twitter account. I asked Mindy, she's on stage because she works at NVIDIA, who is indeed working on super incredible stuff, building the hardware that enables a lot of this cutting edge technologies around VR and games and AIs, etc. So the next one's from someone in the audience who is also letting us know via CNBC that New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says he will resign in 2 weeks in the wake of the sexual harassment scandal. And Cheryl, what's this one about the Treasury Department? Long before the Treasury Department sent $1.4 billion in stimulus checks to dead people last year. Ouch. The U.S. government struggled to keep track with the deceased. So just tweeted that one out. And UK records 23,510 new coronavirus cases and 146 more deaths today alone. 23,000. Senate passes the $1 trillion infrastructure vote. S&P 500 bounces back up. MIT built a Google search to spot the most important tech innovations around software, batteries, lasers, etc. Yes, MIT built a Google search to spot the most important tech innovations of the future. And then Evan, you got this one about all social networks look the same now in terms of their products and services and offerings. I just tweeted it out. You can see it on the Tech News Twitter account where they compare Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube in whether or not they have stories, which is what Snapchat really pioneered that with the ephemeral stories, short form video, shopping, and live audio and live streaming. And you can see the chart of who offers what. And basically, they all offer all of them at this point, with the exception of live audio. So far, only Facebook and Twitter do that.
Yeah, they just copy each other. You know, it's amazing. I guess there's no intellectual property protection, Tyler, or
Not really.
copyright
Well,
on
by
these
the way,
features. It doesn't seem
Twitter's
they can
shopping
protect
is
any of.
days away. So is YouTube's. So is TikTok's. So there's 4 that don't have shopping live yet. Oh, they say testing. So there's you got to see the chart. It's really quite interesting. And then Todd McLeese found this one from The Verge about the CyberDog is a new ominous-looking robot from Xiaomi. Oh my goodness! My favorite tech hardware manufacturer, Xiaomi, is now doing the Boston Dynamics Spot CyberDog. I gotta have one. The Chinese rival to Boston Dynamics Spot for $1,500. And that brings us to the OpenAI live stream, which is just starting. They're the creators of GPT-3. They just started the live stream now. So I'm going to blast the audio here. You can see the video at twitch.tv/OpenAI. I will tweet that out right now to the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW as the most recent tweet. Oh, I can't tweet it because I already tweeted it once before and it thinks I'm spamming. Join the live stream. Let's see if it let me do it this way.
Yeah, you just add something to the reply, then we can see.
Okay, I just tweeted it. So now let me turn on the audio of the live stream.
So
here we go.
When we started, we created a benchmark. On our benchmark, despite the fact that GPT-3 had some rudimentary coding capability, it achieved 0% accuracy. In the meanwhile, we got to the models that can, in 27%, write entire multiple lines of code and solve our coding benchmarks. Today, we are presenting model that solves 37% of problems. But of course, these are just the raw numbers. How does it feel? You're going to see today.
And before we jump into the demos, I want to talk about how you can get access to Codex. And that's really the point of this demonstration. We want to help inspire people to see the kinds of things that Codex can do And we know that we're actually just scratching the surface of what's possible. So we actually really need your help to really dive deep into this model. So the first announcement of the day is that starting today, the Codex model will be available in OpenAI API. So we're going to be doing a beta. Please go and sign up. Get on that wait list. We're going to go and scale up as quickly as we can and try to get this out to everyone. So the second way that you can get access to Codex is we're going to be hosting a new kind of programming competition. This will be held on Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific. Everyone's going to get access to Codex as their teammate. It will also be a competitor on the leaderboard. So it'll be really interesting to see what it's like to work with Codex. Everyone's going to be able to play with it and be able to really experience the kinds of things we're showing you today. So please show up. It's going to be a lot of fun and I think a very unique event. So, all right, let's get started with the demos.
Cool. Thank you, friends. Have fun.
All right. See you later, Wojciech. All right. Hello, Greg.
Hey, Ilya.
So you have a coding demo.
We do. So there's only one way to start a coding demo.
And that is hello world.
All right, of course.
So what you see here is that Greg is typing say hello world into the text box. Now he'll press the green play button. The model will produce the code, and then we will see its output below.
And so exactly right. So what you're seeing here is a simple interface we built on top of the Codex API. So everything you're going to see today is just using the same API everyone's going to get access to. So you could build the exact same thing. So this very simple interface, all that we do is we format the instruction to the model, and we happen to format it a little bit like a Python doc string, so that it looks a little bit like a comment. The model generates code, which we then just execute, and the output is displayed here. So as a user of this kind of system, you just kind of ask the computer to do something, and it actually does it.
Well, it looks like it did a good job with hello world, but let's make it a little bit more complicated. Let's say hello world with empathy.
Say hello world with empathy. Interesting.
Yes.
All right.
It's just a slightly ambiguous instruction.
Do you know what you would say to this?
I mean, I can think of multiple things. I want to know what the model will say.
All right, let's see what happens. I think that's actually a very reasonable choice. And you can ask the model, you can modify your instructions to the model as well. So the kind of thing that you can do is you can also ask it for information that is kind of stored in a session. So now I'm going to say, instead of saying hello world with empathy, I'm going to say it with empathy. And again, the model is kind of free to make a choice of what it wants to do with that. In this case, it decided to do the same thing, which I think is a reasonable choice. It formatted the code a little bit differently. But fundamentally, if you notice, it now has to kind of back reference to the previous part of the conversation. And under the hood, this is just a single request to the Codex API that we're formatting just like you would a GPT-3 request. So it's almost like a chat session of human model, and so forth.
So it looks like the model did a satisfactory job with saying hello world with empathy, but could it say it 5 times?
Okay. That's an awful lot of empathy.
I think it did not a bad job, but it's not quite exactly what I wanted. I didn't with empathy.
Yeah, it's quite silly.
Yes and no. Essentially what they're doing is programming with chat, which is quite amazing if you're a programmer. So what this is doing is opening up programming for everybody to be able to become a programmer by using a very chat-like experience instead of learning a programming language. So that's why they're telling it to do things like, hey, do this. Let's see what it does. Let's try this. Let's see what it does. Because they're not sure how it's going to respond. But they're doing things that normally programmers would do with programming code, but they're not using programming code at all. They're just talking to it like it's a chat bot.
We really want to broadcast our message of hello world to the world. So first of all, make a web page that says, let's say, our message, and save it to a file.
Ooh,
yeah,
curious what it will do.
Taking a little bit of a risk here.
It worked.
There we go. So if you notice, if you can see the code, it's actually writing Python that then emits some HTML.
So in the background, it writes the code for you. They just asked it, hey, make a web page with our message. Well, what is our message? Our message was, hello world with empathy. And so it made a web page with their message, and it knew what it meant when they said our message.
Insane. Wow.
Okay, So is that all we need for a web page?
Well, we should probably let people see the web page.
Seems like a good idea.
All right, so let's start a Python web server to serve that page. Let's give that a try.
It looks like pretty complicated specialized code.
Yes, so let's actually take a look. So we have web server running on port 8000. So we'll take a look. Oops, it's 8000, excuse me. And there we go. Hello world with empathy.
Oh, I would say it's a success.
I think it's a success, yes. So this is the first time we've ever generated this particular message.
So now you are seeing the beginnings of anyone can be a developer without learning any programming language, just using natural language chat. So you can tell the AI, I want to build a website like this. No, make the page yellow. No, put an image of, this over here and build it this way and do it that way. And it's completely language-based programming. Codeless. Yeah, no code, but it's also not even visual manipulation. It's you manipulate it like you're talking to a bot. And it does the actual code in the background, which of course you could then edit or send to somebody who does know how to code.
Thinking super hard about it, decomposing it in smaller pieces. This is the really cognitive aspects of building something. And then there's a second piece, which is map a small piece of functionality to code, right? Whether it's an existing library, an existing function, whether it's in your own code base or out there in the world. And that second part is where this model shines.
I think that's might be the extent of their big announcement, but let's let it run for another couple minutes and see if there's another big announcement.
So it really, I think, accelerates me as a programmer and takes away the boring stuff so I can focus on the fun ones.
Okay, so that is a working web page that you've got, but wouldn't it be nice if you could send lots of emails with Hello World to everyone who is listening to us on the live stream?
Yes. So here's a moment for everyone to participate. So if you would like to receive an email as part of this demo from Codex, I think that we should be posting a link to sign up into the chat now. It should also be displayed on the screen. So please go ahead and sign up, and we'll give you a moment to do that.
You have to go to. You have to sign up at openai.com/c. And so to participate, openai.com/c, and when you get there, it just asks you to put in your email address. It's just a box, and you subscribe to their email and confirm you're not a robot. And now they're gonna do something to blast everybody who has signed up.
And then you make it work. You make the neural network big. You train it on code autocomplete. And by being good enough at code autocomplete, we get the capabilities that you see here. It actually reads all the letters, all the words that we are giving it. It chews and digests them inside of its neural activations, inside of its neurons. And then it emits the code that we see. And because the autocomplete is so accurate, the code actually runs, and it runs correctly.
So now let's show you how to hook Codex up to sending email. So we're going to be using the MailChimp API in order to do this. And Codex, again, has seen all the public code out there, but I want it to use my MailChimp account. And maybe I have a particular way that I want to call the API. So it's very easy to give Codex new capabilities, almost the same way that you explain to a programmer how to use a new method. You can do the same thing for Codex. And so I want to show you the only magic that's going on here is that we have this plugin where on the left is instructions for humans, and we can take a look at the actual code that is supposed to be installed on our system. It's just a very simple wrapper around the MailChimp API where I plugged in the API key already. And now we can simply take this documentation written in very readable form and paste it to the model.
So literally just those 3 lines of text is enough for the model to understand how to use the API.
Exactly. But before we send the message, what actual message should we send to people?
I mean, there should obviously a hello world, as well as something truly useful, like the price of Bitcoin.
That sounds extremely useful. ask the model to look up the current Bitcoin price.
Let's see if it works.
All right, so it seems to have done something. And by the way, this particular API, I guess, is used enough out there in public code that the model felt it was worth its while to memorize exactly how it works. And now let's actually send the email blast. Now send everyone an email telling them A, hello world, and B, the current Bitcoin price. So we'll leave it a little bit up to the model to decide exactly how it wants to format that email.
Yeah, I'm curious what messages we'll choose.
Let's see what happens. All right.
Oh, looks like a very sensible message.
Indeed. So now it's calling the MailChimp API. So let's give it a moment. Spinner is still spinning.
Yeah. So it will probably, oh,
there we go.
That's a lot of emails.
Yeah, so we're sending 1,472 emails. It may take a little bit of time for these to deliver. Again, at this point, Codex has done its job. At this point, we've made the call to MailChimp. MailChimp is queuing these emails up on its servers as we speak. But as you receive the emails, please post in Twitch chat so everyone knows that they were received.
So I feel like it was a pretty satisfactory Hello World demo.
I think this is the world's most advanced Hello World demo.
And while 1,472 lucky recipients are waiting for the email, it's time for us to move to our next stage.
I think so.
Let us build a game.
All right. So we've shown building, sort of very simple functionality, right? So it's kind of single shot, it required a little bit of back referencing, but mostly it's you ask for a particular thing you want done right away. And maybe it involves doing some complicated import of a particular API and use it in a specific way. But what we want to show now is building up a more complex program, actually, sort of building something that spans many lines of code.
That's right. And the game I have in mind is one where a person will be trying to dodge a boulder.
All right. Well, let's give that a try. So first of all, I'm going to look up a silhouette of a person. I figure we should probably not use a real image of a person for this because they're going to get squashed by a boulder.
It is a very wise choice. And what you see here is something very similar to the previous demo, where Greg is typing the instruction to the text box, then he presses play. The model does its neural magic and produces code, and now we get this oversized person on the page.
Yep. And I want to point out, so the only difference here, as far as the output is concerned, is this is outputting JavaScript as opposed to Python. It's actually the same model under the hood. So the only piece of magic we're not showing you right now is we've tried a little bit of context to the model. In the case of Python, we have just one example of following an instruction.
I just got the email,
We have like 2 examples of doing it.
and it did exactly what they said, asked it to do. It says, hello world and the price of Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I feel like it was a good first step.
Yeah, same.
What I would really like is for the code
same.
to be a lot smaller and for it to be controllable with the left and right arrow keys.
Great. And we also just got a report that the emails have started rolling in. So I think that's a success for MailChimp and for Codex. So I think that's great. So let's see how big we want to make the person, maybe 100 pixels. Does that seem about right?
Let's find out.
All right, let's give that a try. And actually what I'm going to also do is I just want to show people the full prompt that's being sent so that you can really see what's going on without any magic. So I just opened up the Chrome inspector. We have a completions endpoint, and you can actually just do the post message, scroll to the post message, and you can look at the entire bit of the prompt. And let me show you what that looks like, expand it out.
And to just explain what you're seeing here, the way this neural network works is that it's a really, really good pattern completion system that happens to work on patterns in code. It's like the world's best yes and improv actor whose domain happens to be code rather than improv.
Exactly. And so we simply provide it with this context of, oh, you're supposed to follow some instructions. And then the model realizes my job is to latch onto instructions. Okay, so let's get back to building. So we've got the person's 100 pixels. Will look pretty good?
I think so.
All right. Now, what do you want me to happen next?
So I want it to be at a reasonable position at the bottom of the space of the screen and to be controllable with arrows.
All right, well, let's do that. So first, let's set its position to, let's say, 500 pixels down and 400 pixels from the left.
Seems reasonable as far as I can tell.
All right, let's see what happens. All right, perfect. And now make it controllable with the left and right arrow keys. Now, this is a pretty high-level instruction. Exactly what's supposed to happen when you push left and what's supposed to happen when you push right. The model really has to infer what's going on in here, and it can't look at the screen. The model only has access to all of this text over here. And so from that alone, it has to infer what to do. But let's see if it worked.
Let's see, I'm curious myself. The code looks reasonable. Okay. It's quite good, but this looks like something I don't quite like. I don't want it to be able to get out of the screen like
All right,
this.
you found the problem.
Yes.
But it is alive, which I think is pretty good. But let's see if we can fix that problem. So constantly check if the person is off screen and put it back on the screen if so. So again, pretty high level. It's possible that the model won't quite know what we're asking for, but let's give it a try.
This is really pretty amazing how it works.
Pretty good.
What about the other side? Let's see what's happening there.
I don't know if you guys are watching this, but if you are, and if you're a developer, this is kind of
Oh
mind
yeah, we
blowing.
are.
Scroll bar at the bottom.
That is no good. Well, fortunately, you can just say disable scroll bars. By the way, I actually don't know how to do this in JavaScript.
Does the model know?
Well,
let's test. The model does know.
There we go. So phase one complete. The person is movable.
So the reason
People in the chat room are saying, "Oh no, my job is gone now."
So also make the person move upwards if you press spacebar. Give that a try.
Someone else in the chat room says, "Why am I studying computer science again?"
That's nice. We need to make it also move downwards.
Oh no. Okay, and
so make it move downwards if you press the down arrow key.
So we now have this nice flying person.
Let's see. Okay, so now we have given it full, all directional control.
Good. All right, perfect. So we now have this very nice game where the person can go anywhere with very unintuitive usage of a space bar.
That's great.
For those just joining, we are watching the Twitch live stream of a major OpenAI announcement at twitch.tv/OpenAI. You can see it in our Twitter account at TNATW. It's the most recent tweet under the pinned tweet, where they're giving a truly mind-blowing demonstration of programming a web page with animations without any code at all, just by talking to this AI chatbot.
Okay, so once again, we just request for the boulder to appear, and it appears. I hope it will appear.
Oh, it does appear.
An oversized boulder.
Massive boulder.
Let's make it smaller.
All right. How many pixels?
Can you just ask it to be small?
Oh, that's a great point. Make it small.
Okay, this is too small. Can you ask it to be 4 times as large?
Let's give it a try. That's actually interesting. So it actually used a style that transform. Now you might want to do it that way. If you want to do it a different way, you can also just say, set the width to be 4x larger. And the great thing about JavaScript, all of this JavaScript just running directly in your browser. And so we actually have all of this playground set up so that if you don't like an instruction, you can just delete it. If you want to modify it, you can always just edit it, and then you can edit the code directly.
Yeah. So I like the size of this boulder.
Perfect.
But now I want it to fall down.
Okay.
And then when it hits the ground, I want it to reappear from the top again, somewhere else.
Now, the thing about Codex is that, again, coding is two things. It's deeply understanding a problem, figuring out how to chunk it up into smaller pieces. And it is secondly mapping a small chunk of problem statement to code. And Codex really excels at that first part. The first part, if you ask for too much at once, it won't succeed. And so let's actually give it a try just to say, now fall from the sky and wrap around.
Okay, I wonder if it will work. Let's find out.
So this is going to require doing a lot of things. So in fact, if you notice, all that it did is it just did the first part of saying, I got to get it absolutely positioned. I put it in a particular location. It didn't do the second part. And so when Codex fails like this, the kind of thing you can do is you can just try again. And I think that, again, like one really nice thing about doing this in JavaScript is there's no punishment for getting it wrong, right? You have a system that's very stateless that you can just re-execute and try again. Your iteration cycle can be just truly immense. And that for me has been kind of the most exciting part about working with Codex is that it just kind of means that you get to just think about what you want and you spend less time of like, okay, now I need to go to Stack Overflow and figure out how, whatever property it is to disable the scroll bars, which I have already forgotten. But let's now try breaking down this instruction into smaller pieces. So first, I think Codex had a good point that we should first position it to, let's set its position to the top of the screen at a random horizontal location.
Hopefully that's a simpler instruction that it could do.
Seems pretty good.
And it did it.
Yep, and if we want to verify it's actually random, we can just kind of re-execute this code multiple times. Seems pretty random to me. Now have it fall from the sky and wrap around. So
okay.
Let's try. So again, still a lot going on in this instruction, so it may not work.
The code is sensitive. Oh, it's moving. It's going down.
Moving. Okay, we got something. We got some signs of life.
It's going back.
And
yes,
there we go.
All right.
Very nice.
This is very nice indeed.
It is alive. All right, great. So I think in order to put a capstone on this game, we just need to.
Indeed, there's no game if you can't lose.
Sad to say, but we do need to implement that law.
Oh shit! They basically just made a video game. So now there's this big boulder falling from the top of the screen, and they have the man at the bottom that they can move with their mouse, or their arrow keys rather, which is essentially a very simple video game. Wow. They just made a very simple video game through nothing but a few chat instructions.
What words will encourage the model we choose?
So you can do it. So that's pretty good. And so the only thing is that the way that this actually was implemented is implemented as a key down listener. And what we really want is we want a function that gets called when you lose. So we can get rid of both of these. And we can try this one more time.
This is like the best coding for kids thing ever imaginable.
Define a function. So make a function.
Yeah, no, but that too.
Kids,
but I mean, the fact that now the barrier of entry, for kids to start coding is gone, and that's transformative.
Yes, I
I
was
can't
just
believe it's
telling my nephew
JavaScript
to
too.
start learning how to code. So this will be a good avenue to start.
Well, I
But
mean,
JavaScript is really hard, right? I mean, it's interesting. It's JavaScript code.
and then anyone that's done a lot of code that's like sat with a client, they'll say stuff like that to you, like, "Oh, I want that boulder like falling right there," and you say to them like, "Whoa, it's not that easy. It's going to take me a few minutes to do." And now it's just doing it. And so that's what Tyler means. It's perfect for kids because kids have this imagination saying that car should be flying, and you're like, "Whoa, that car shouldn't fly," and now this thing just does it.
You got squashed and a very encouraging message to try again. I think that's very good life advice from Codex right there. Okay.
This has got huge implications for
A small number of minutes.
I think so.
If for nothing else, then for how many the whole new demographics that can get into coding. The first one that comes to my mind is kids. This could be used by kids that are like as soon as they can start typing.
The Codex model to use whatever API you want. API doesn't know.
You gonna have an after party, Tyler?
Comes with an API.
In fact, I used to work at a company whose entire job is to build an API.
Yeah, let's see if there's another announcement. That's enough. that's a huge freaking announcement they just made.
Because I riffed on this in Tech News about 4 or 5 months ago, but I'd love to share that when we're ready to go into a after party.
So how will this
No,
be
they're
commercialized
intentionally
or
leaving it totally
users?
open.
It turns out that Microsoft Word, like many pieces of software, has
Tyler, can you send me the link to register? I'll send it to my nephew.
You go to just openai.com. Yeah.
Oh, anybody can sign up? Okay.
It's called Codex. And so now they're getting into the nitty gritty of.
So here is a poem that was actually one of my favorite poems as a child. Really? Oh yeah. It's called Jabberwocky. It's very fun. I'm going to paste it into Microsoft Word, and let me get rid of these leading spaces before we start. Sorry, that's on this.
Greg, this will take forever.
Hold on. You know what? Fortunately, with the Codex add-in, I don't have to delete them. Delete all initial spaces.
And it worked.
It did work.
Oh, interesting.
Spaces are gone, but all the other spaces are still there. And just like before, the instruction at the top.
They've added OpenAI GPT-3 to Microsoft Word. That's wild. and MailChimp API. So now they're bridging GPT-3 as an API to work with lots of other APIs.
Built-in speech recognizer, so we didn't write that. So if it has transcription errors, we take no responsibility for it. But then we send whatever request is put here to the API, and it generates actual code in the Microsoft Word API.
And what you see here is a taste of the future. As the model gets really good, as the neural network gets really good at turning instructions to correct API calls, it will become possible to do more and more sophisticated things with your software just by telling it what to do.
And I think this is the biggest contrast with GPT-3, like the biggest step on top of GPT-3 in my mind. And this wasn't obvious to us going in, but I think it has kind of emerged from what we built. GPT-3 is a system that you talk to, and it talks back to you. So the only impact it has is in your mind. With Codex, you talk to it, it generates code, which means it can actually manipulate or it can actually act in the computer world on your behalf. And I think that that's a really powerful thing. You actually have a system that can carry out commands on your behalf.
For example, let's do something a little bit more complicated.
Yep. So do you want to give it a try?
Yeah. Now make every fifth line bold. Okay, phew. I was really worried about the speech recognition part.
Yes. Well, there we go.
Oh, a success.
A success indeed. So I think that's pretty good. And, I think that what this kind of demo shows you...
It's amazing how much more powerful Word becomes when you add GPT-3 to it.
You need a system that has the kind of GPT world understanding, so it can flexibly sort of interpolate between different languages and can really understand the intent that you're putting forth.
And while we are very happy with the neural network that we're showing you today, which is a better code model than the one we had previously, it is still only...
When GPT-4 comes out, I just can't imagine you can have the sloppiest conversational language in program stuff. It's going to be truly mind-blowing.
So that's the end of our demos.
There you go.
I want to get back into programming.
The latest generation of the Codex model. It's available in OpenAI's API starting today. So please sign up on the...
I wonder if this will work for mobile
There's your
apps
link,
on the App Store.
Cheryl, openai.com/join.
That will be Thursday, 10 a.m. We're really excited for you to get a chance to play with it. So thank you very much for tuning in. We're excited to see what you're going to build.
And thank you for joining us to experience the magic of neural networks.
I love the Russian guy looking at the wrong camera there at the end. Super cool. Wow. That's freaking cool.
What I liked is that there's still a little bit of amazement as they send these commands. They're like, I wonder if it's going to do it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, it did. It did it.
Go.
Yeah. Hey, Tyler,
as long
can
as
I
you
riff
want.
for just a couple minutes on this? Yeah. Yeah. About 4 months ago, I riffed on exactly this inexorable evolution on Tech News. And what I said at that time, and what I still believe to be true, is that the future of programming is there's two classes of programmers. Those that program this voice interface for programming, and everyone else. And so the number of programmers worldwide is going to shrink in the elite group that does this kind of voice-based programming, but the accessibility to everyone becoming their own programmer is going to go through the roof. So there's a couple of very direct corollaries. The first is that in order to avoid exaggeration of social inequities, we need to make sure that training for voice-based coding is part of the curriculum for everyone, no matter what their socioeconomic position at their school is. Otherwise, it's going to really amplify it. The second implication is that while they were excited to see that whatever they said worked, these are folks who know the background layers of coding. And so what's going to happen is, since there's a trade-off in language in general, but especially in English, between expressivity, that is the ability to be very descriptive, versus reproducibility, which is the reproducibility and fidelity of a an utterance to an intent. That there's going to be this environment. This is something I predicted 4 years ago when one of the founders of Wired asked me what I thought of her daughter going into programming. Was that the elite programmers are going to do the programming of these kind of interfaces, but everyone else is going to be using the voice interface. And at the voice interface, children are going to learn how to speak more precisely within whatever their native language is supported in these voice interfaces. And so getting training early in life about how to speak with more reproducible precision is going to be a differentiator of who really excels in this space. So to the extent that you can disambiguate sloppy language, it'll offset that difference. But to the extent that children learn from an early age how to have more precise language when speaking to a machine, it's going to propel their careers as voice-based programmers. So I think what they just showed is exactly where the future of all programming is going to go, into those two classes of programmers.
Tyler, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else with a thought? I'm just imagining high school computer teachers going into class tomorrow and showing, being like, hey. But it's funny. A lot of the comments were funny. They were making jokes like, hey, computer, bomb Russia. Like, just, they were getting quite wild. But it's truly wild. I mean, if you ever learned a programming language, you feel like, holy cow. You have
Yeah, COBOL,
and if you've learned any
Pascal.
programming language, you have an understanding of what
That
it's
was the last one I
automating in the
learned.
background on your behalf. It's like, holy shit, that's a lot of learning that it's done for you.
Does it generate and show you
Yeah,
all the code and comments
it
and
showed all the code
in
that it was
some way?
generating
Like
on the
how?
right hand column, and then if it in one
Okay, I'm
instance it
gonna watch
didn't
the live
run
video.
correctly, so they deleted it and asked it a different comment, and then it did it correctly. And yeah, so it's, if you do know some code, it makes it, it's essentially saving you tons of time because you can still edit the code that it makes. But the APIs thing is wild. Like just using GPT-3 in MailChimp to control MailChimp, and the idea that you'll use something like GPT-3 to eventually control your computer is wild, totally wild. And Microsoft Word, I'm trying to think of what other APIs I would love it to tap into. Huh. Okay. Well, I'm just looking at the Cyber Dog by Xiaomi on the website from the link that Evan found. It's saying it'll be.
It's amazing how cheap it is. I mean, it's what a fifth of the price.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the value. Like the Spot is interesting, but it's
Yeah,
five to
this
ten
one.
grand, I think. So
I
it's
I think
not.
it's
believe that's true.
75 grand.
I thought they had a cheaper one, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it goes
it's
from
really for
the
consumer, almost
original
consumer
Boston
use.
Dynamics Spot is 75 grand. This one's 1,500, so it's a factor of about 50x. Yeah, it looks cool.
Does it
They say
say
they're
when
gonna
it's available to
release
work? Because I
1,000
would
of them
totally
to
want a
enthusiasts
Xiaomi
first.
dog.
Um, it would release only 1,000 units initially for Xiaomi fans, engineers, and robotic enthusiasts. The company says it hopes these first users will propel the development and potential of quadruped robots, and the first 1,000 units will cost $1,500. Looks cool. I just want to know what kind of functions it has. It says it has facial recognition built in, so it can recognize people and it recognizes its quote unquote owner and can follow them around, take normal commands verbally or from your phone. Has obviously cameras in it. trying to imagine what the best use cases would be. I mean, they give the examples of using it in minefields, and I mean, maybe as a security device for a home or something.
Yeah, just roaming around your garden or your property, just kind of keeping an eye on things when you're not at home.
Every body shop has a pit bull or two or a Rottweiler or two. Maybe they'll get replaced, because those Rottweilers like steaks.
Yeah, Tyler, Ben is in the audience. I think he's teaching kids how to code, right? So
Yeah,
maybe
Ben, did you
he'll
see
have
this
some
OpenAI
comments.
demonstration? Kind of removing the need for kids to learn programming languages by just chatting casually with GPT-3 they give the demonstration example of a very simple video game, basically with just a few chat things of like show a figure of a man on the screen, show a big boulder on the screen, make the boulder fall from the top of the screen, move the man with the arrows on the keyboard, and then if the boulder hits the man dies, game over, and let it start again. Boom, you have a little video game of a man trying to avoid getting hit by a boulder. You could easily be like, now make 10 boulders, and then you have 10 boulders falling from the screen, and you have to avoid the boulders. There's a video game. Fantastic. And then you could say, give the man a gun to shoot the boulder, to break the boulder, and now you could build Galaga in about 30 minutes, basically.
I'm excited to see what it can become as like a tutor or a teaching assistant.
So wild. Anywho, so we'll pause there. We're going to meet again as we do twice a day. Click on the title of the room. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tyler,
Right.
the
So let's
tech
head
room
on
is
over
open,
to
right?
Tech News Around the World Med Tech Edition with our friend Heyman over there. So we'll see everybody there, or hopefully see you here tomorrow. And thank you, everybody, for another fun session of Tech News Around the World. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.